When a runaway bride crashes into the life of a reclusive tech billionaire on the night of her wedding, neither expects what happens next. She's fleeing a dangerous man. He's hiding from the world. But sometimes the storm brings exactly what you need.
I'm sorry, the storm. I had nowhere to go.
You're trespassing. This is private property.
She was supposed to marry one of the most powerful men in New York. Instead, she's standing soaking wet in a stranger's mansion, wearing a ruined wedding dress. He hasn't let anyone into his world for 2 years, but something about this mysterious woman changes everything.
I left. I couldn't marry him.
Then it's settled. You'll stay here until we figure out what to do next.
What starts as sanctuary becomes something neither can deny, but her dangerous ex-fiancé will stop at nothing to get her back, and he's willing to destroy the man protecting her. Will love be enough to survive the storm that's coming, or will her past tear apart the future they're building together? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the bridal suite at the luxurious Plaza Hotel. White roses and lilies filled every corner of the room, their sweet scent almost suffocating. Raina Ellis stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. The designer wedding gown hugged her curves perfectly, $50,000 of imported French lace and Italian silk that felt like a prison wrapped around her body. "So you look absolutely stunning," her mother Vivian said as she adjusted the veil. "Kenneth will be speechless when he sees you walking down that aisle." Raina forced a smile, but remained silent. Kenneth Blackwood, heir to the Blackwood Financial Group, had proposed to her after only 4 months of dating. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of expensive dinners, private jets, and lavish gifts, but not once had she felt the love her parents claimed would come with time. "Is something wrong?" Vivian asked, noticing her daughter's distant expression. "I'm just nervous," Raina lied, her voice barely above a whisper. The truth was much more complicated. At 27, Raina had spent her entire life trying to please her parents. After graduating from Columbia with honors, she had abandoned her dreams of opening her own restaurant to work at her father's law firm. Dating Kenneth had been another way to make them proud. The perfect power couple, as her father called them. "I'll give you a moment alone," Vivian said, checking her diamond watch. "The ceremony starts in an hour. Don't be late." As soon as the door closed, Raina felt the panic rising in her chest. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. All she knew was that she couldn't marry Kenneth. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone, but stopped. Who would she call? Her best friend Amanda had warned her months ago that Kenneth wasn't right for her, but Raina had chosen her parents' approval over their friendship. And Kenneth. The thought of his reaction made her shudder. Without thinking, Raina grabbed her small purse, containing only her lipstick and a few $100s in cash. She left her phone on the vanity, knowing it could be tracked. Then, still wearing her wedding dress, she slipped out of the suite and took the service elevator down to the kitchen. "Miss, are you okay?" asked a startled chef as she rushed past. "Wedding day jitters," Raina called back with a forced laugh. "Just need some fresh air." She exited through the loading dock and hailed a taxi before anyone could stop her. "Where to?" the driver asked, eyeing her wedding dress in the rearview mirror. "Grand Central Station," Raina said, her heart pounding. At the station, she bought a ticket for the first train leaving the city, not caring where it was headed. As she settled into her seat, rain began to pelt the windows. The storm matched the turmoil inside her. For the first time in her life, Raina had made a decision for herself. She had no plan, no destination, but she felt something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. The train took her north, to a small town in upstate New York she'd never heard of. By the time she stepped onto the platform, the storm had intensified. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, illuminating the deserted station. "Miss, you can't stay here," the station attendant told her as he prepared to close. "Last bus left an hour ago and there won't be another train until morning." "Is there a hotel nearby?" Raina asked, realizing how unprepared she was. "About 3 miles down the main road," he replied, looking skeptically at her soaked wedding dress and ruined designer heels. "But in this weather, I'll manage," she said, though she had no idea how. Raina walked for what felt like hours, the rain soaking through her dress, making each step heavier than the last. Her shoes fell apart on the gravel road, forcing her to continue barefoot. The darkness was oppressive, broken only by occasional flashes of lightning that revealed dense forest on either side of the road. Just as she was about to collapse from exhaustion, a flash of lightning revealed a tall, wrought-iron gate. Through the bars, She could make out a winding path leading to what appeared to be a large house in the distance. Without hesitation, Raina pushed at the gate. To her surprise, it swung open with a loud creak. The path was long and curved through immaculately maintained gardens, now thrashing in the wind and rain. Finally, she reached the mansion, a grand, imposing structure with Gothic architecture that loomed against the stormy sky. Gathering her courage, Raina climbed the steps to the massive front door and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time, desperation giving her strength. Still nothing. Trying the handle, she was surprised to find the door unlocked. It swung open silently, revealing a dimly lit foyer with a grand staircase that curved upward to the second floor. The interior was elegant, but austere, like something from another time. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing through the empty space. "Is anyone here?" Water pooled at her feet as she stepped inside, seeking shelter from the storm. The mansion was eerily quiet, except for the sound of rain against the windows and distant thunder. Too exhausted to go any further, Raina sank down onto the bottom step of the grand staircase, pulling her knees to her chest and trying to stop her body from shaking. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, a harsh voice was cutting through the darkness. "Who the hell are you, and what are you doing in my house?" Raina looked up to see a tall figure standing over her. In the dim light, she could make out broad shoulders and a stern face partially obscured by unkempt dark hair. Despite his clearly expensive clothes, black pants and a grey cashmere sweater, there was something wild and untamed about him. "I'm sorry," she stammered, trying to stand but finding her legs too weak. "The storm, I had nowhere to go." The man stepped closer, and Raina could now see his face clearly. He was strikingly handsome in a harsh way, with sharp cheekbones and intense eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. But there was something else, a deep sadness etched into every line of his face. "You're trespassing," he said coldly. "This is private property." "Please," Raina whispered, not knowing what else to say. "I just need somewhere to stay until the storm passes." The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're a bride," he finally said, noting her ruined dress. "I was supposed to be," she admitted. "What happened? Did he leave you at the altar?" There was no sympathy in his voice, only cold curiosity. "No," Raina said, meeting his gaze. "I left." Something flickered in the man's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He ran a hand through his dark hair and sighed heavily. "What's your name?" he asked. "Raina," she replied, deliberately omitting her last name. "And you are?" "Grayson Wilde," he said, after a moment's hesitation, as if expecting her to recognize the name. When she showed no reaction, he seemed almost relieved. "There's a guest room in the east wing," he said finally. "You can stay there until the storm passes." "Nothing more." "Thank you," Raina breathed, relief flooding through her. "Don't thank me yet," Grayson replied darkly. "I'm not exactly known for my hospitality." He led her up the grand staircase, down a long corridor, and into a large bedroom. Despite the mansion's Gothic exterior, this room was surprisingly modern, with clean lines and minimal furnishings. "Bathrooms through there," Grayson said, pointing to a door. "There should be towels and toiletries. I'll find you something dry to wear." Before Raina could thank him again, he was gone, closing the door firmly behind him. Alone in the strange room, the enormity of what she had done began to sink in. She had left Kenneth Blackwood at the altar. By now her parents would be frantic, the guests would be gossiping, and Kenneth would be furious. The thought of his anger made her shiver. Few people saw behind Kenneth's charming public persona to the controlling, possessive man underneath. That side of him had emerged slowly over their relationship, in jealous comments and subtle threats wrapped in loving words. It was that side of him that had finally given her the courage to run. Raina peeled off her ruined wedding dress and stepped into the shower, letting hot water wash away the remnants of the day. When she emerged, she found a set of clothes folded neatly on the bed, a pair of grey sweatpants and a black t-shirt, both far too large for her small frame. As she dressed, a knock came at the door. Grayson stood there with a tray containing a sandwich, an apple, and a glass of water. "I assumed you hadn't eaten," he said, placing the tray on a small table by the window. "Thank you," Raina said, suddenly aware of her hunger. "You didn't have to do this." "Basic human decency," he replied with a shrug. "Don't mistake it for kindness." "Why would you say that about yourself?" Raina asked, before she could stop herself. Grayson's expression hardened. "You don't know me." "No, I don't," she admitted. "But I'd like to." A bitter laugh escaped him. "No, you wouldn't." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The storm is supposed to last through tomorrow. After that, I expect you'll be on your way." After he left, Raina ate the simple meal and then moved to the window. Rain lashed against the glass, and lightning periodically illuminated the vast grounds surrounding the mansion. In the distance, she could see dense forest extending as far as the eye could see. The mansion was completely isolated, cut off from the world. For the first time since fleeing the wedding, Raina allowed herself to cry. Silent tears streamed down her face as she thought about everything she had left behind. Her family, her life, her identity. She had no plan, no future, just the desperate need to escape a life that wasn't truly hers. Eventually, exhaustion overcame her, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Morning came with soft light filtering through gauzy curtains. For a moment, Raina didn't remember where she was. Then, it all came rushing back. The wedding, her escape, the storm, Grayson Wilde. She made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee to a modern kitchen that contrasted with the rest of the mansion's antique feel. Grayson sat at a large island, reading something on a tablet, a steaming mug in front of him. "Good morning," Raina said softly. Grayson looked up, seeming almost surprised to see her, as if he'd forgotten her presence in his home. "There's coffee," he said, nodding toward a pot. "Help yourself." Raina poured herself a cup, grateful for the warmth between her hands. "Thank you for letting me stay last night." "The storm hasn't passed yet," he replied, looking out the window where rain continued to fall, though less violently than the night before. An awkward silence fell between them. Raina took in her surroundings, noting the high-end appliances that looked barely used. The kitchen, like the rest of what she'd seen of the mansion, felt unlived in, more like a showpiece than a home. "So," Grayson finally said, "are you going to tell me why you ran from your own wedding?" Raina hesitated. "It's complicated." "It usually is," he replied dryly. "What about you?" she countered. "Why do you live alone in this huge place?" His face darkened. "That's none of your business." "Yet my failed wedding is yours," Raina challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. For a moment, Grayson looked taken aback. Then, unexpectedly, his lips curved into a slight smile. "Fair point." Just then, Raina's stomach growled loudly, breaking the tension. To her surprise, Grayson stood and moved to the refrigerator. "I'm not much of a cook," he admitted, pulling out eggs and bread, "but I can manage breakfast." "I can cook," Raina offered. "If you don't mind." Grayson raised an eyebrow but stepped aside. "Be my guest." Cooking had always been Raina's passion, her escape from stress. She quickly found what she needed and set to work, making a simple but delicious breakfast of French toast, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit she discovered in the refrigerator. As they ate, Grayson studied her with curiosity. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother taught me," Raina explained, smiling at the memory. "She wanted me to open a restaurant someday." "Why didn't you?" Raina's smile faded. "My parents had other plans for me. Law school, corporate career, marrying well." "And you went along with it," Grayson observed. "Until yesterday." "Yes," she admitted. "Until yesterday." After breakfast, the rain continued to fall, trapping them inside together. Despite his initial coldness, Grayson didn't seem eager to return to whatever he had been doing before her arrival. Instead, he gave her a tour of the main floor of the mansion, which was even larger than Raina had imagined. "This place has been in my family for generations," he explained, as they walked through a grand library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, "though I've modernized parts of it." "It's beautiful," Raina said, running her fingers along the spines of leather-bound books. "But it doesn't feel like anyone lives here." Grayson stiffened. "I'm not here much." "Where do you go?" "I work," he said simply. "My company keeps me busy." "What company?" Raina asked. Grayson gave her a strange look. "Wild Technologies." The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Raina couldn't place it. Technology wasn't her area of expertise. "You really don't know who I am," Grayson mused, seeming genuinely surprised. "Should I?" "No," he said after a moment. "It's actually refreshing." As the day wore on, they fell into an unexpected companionship. Raina found herself drawn to Grayson's intensity, to the mystery that surrounded him. There was pain there, deep and unresolved, but also moments of unexpected warmth that caught her off guard. For dinner, Raina convinced Grayson to let her cook again, making a simple pasta dish with ingredients she found in his surprisingly well-stocked pantry. "This is delicious," Grayson said as they ate in the formal dining room, a massive table between them. "I usually just order in." "In the middle of nowhere?" Raina asked skeptically. I have a helicopter pad out back, Grayson replied, completely serious. You'd be surprised what people will deliver when you pay enough. The casual mention of such wealth reminded Raina of the world she had fled, a world of privilege and excess that had never felt like hers. After dinner, they moved to a sitting room where Grayson lit a fire. The rain outside had finally stopped, though dark clouds still hung low in the sky. The storm has passed, Grayson observed, staring into the flames. You should be able to leave tomorrow. Raina felt a strange disappointment at his words. Yes, I suppose I should. Where will you go? He asked, turning to look at her. I don't know, she admitted. I didn't exactly plan this escape. Do you regret it? Grayson's question was direct, his gaze intense. No, Raina said firmly. I don't. Something passed between them then, a moment of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Both of them knew what it meant to feel trapped, to long for escape. You could stay, Grayson said suddenly, then looked as surprised by the words as Raina felt. Just until you figure things out, he added quickly. Before Raina could respond, the sound of a car engine broke the silence. Grayson moved to the window, his body tensing as headlights swept across the driveway. Are you expecting someone? Raina asked, anxiety suddenly gripping her. No, Grayson replied, his voice hard. I never have visitors. He moved quickly toward the front door, Raina following hesitantly behind. Through the window beside the door, they could see a black sedan parked in the circular driveway. A man in a dark suit stepped out, his face obscured by the night and the rain that had begun to fall again. Stay here, Grayson instructed Raina, his tone brooking no argument. He opened the door just as the man reached the steps. Mr. Wilde, the visitor said, his voice professional and detached. My name is James Thornton. I'm a private investigator. I didn't hire a private investigator, Grayson replied coldly. No, sir, you didn't, Thornton agreed. But I believe you have information that's relevant to my current case. What case? The investigator reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I'm looking for this woman, he said, handing Grayson a photograph. She disappeared yesterday from her wedding in Manhattan. Her fiancé is extremely concerned about her welfare. From her position just inside the doorway, Raina couldn't see the photograph, but she didn't need to. She knew what it showed, her in her wedding dress, standing at the altar beside Kenneth Blackwood. Grayson's face revealed nothing as he studied the image. I don't know her, he said flatly, handing the photograph back, and I don't appreciate uninvited guests at this hour, or any hour. Of course, Mr. Wilde, Thornton said smoothly, but perhaps you could take my card. If you happen to see her or hear anything, Mr. Blackwood is offering a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return. Grayson took the card without comment and began to close the door. One more thing, Thornton added quickly. The woman's name is Raina Ellis. Her fiancé, Kenneth Blackwood, is extremely worried about her mental state. She's been under psychiatric care and stopped taking her medication recently. He just wants to make sure she's safe. Raina felt her blood run cold. It was a lie, all of it. She had never been under psychiatric care, had never taken medication, but it was exactly the kind of lie Kenneth would tell to control the narrative, to make her look unstable, and himself the concerned fiancé. I'll keep that in mind, Grayson said, his voice revealing nothing. Good night, Mr. Thornton. He closed the door firmly and turned to find Raina standing there, her face pale with fear. He's lying, she whispered. Everything he said about me, it's all lies. Grayson studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once. I know, he said simply. How? Raina asked, surprised. Because I recognize the look of someone running from something real, Grayson replied. Not something imagined. He moved past her to a side table and picked up a phone. After dialing a number, he spoke briefly to someone about increasing security on the property. You believe me? Raina asked when he hung up. Just like that? Let's just say I know what powerful men are capable of when they don't get their way, Grayson said darkly, and I know what it costs to escape them. He looked down at the business card in his hand, then back at Raina. It seems your fiancé is not the type to let go easily. No, Raina agreed, wrapping her arms around herself. He's not. Then it's settled, Grayson said with finality. You'll stay here until we figure out what to do next. This place has top-notch security, and no one comes in without my permission. Why would you help me? Raina asked, genuinely confused by his offer. You don't even know me. Grayson was silent for a moment, his expression distant, as if he were seeing something or someone else entirely. Let's just say I have my reasons, he finally replied. Now it's late, and we both need rest. We can talk more in the morning. As Raina climbed the stairs back to the east wing, she felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Kenneth was looking for her. That much was clear. But for the first time since she'd fled, she didn't feel completely alone. In the guest room, she stood by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked grounds of Grayson Wilde's estate. Beyond those walls, Kenneth Blackwood was hunting for her, spinning lies, using his money and influence to track her down. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself thinking of Grayson's words. "I recognize the look of someone running from something real." In those words, she had heard understanding, perhaps even acceptance. And in this strange, isolated mansion, with its cold, wounded owner, Raina felt something she hadn't expected to find: a sanctuary. She slept better that night than she had in months, unaware that downstairs, Grayson Wilde sat in his study, staring at the private investigator's card and thinking about the runaway bride who had unexpectedly entered his life, and the dangerous man determined to find her. Morning light streamed through the curtains as Raina awoke in the East Wing guest room. For a moment she forgot where she was, not in the honeymoon suite with Kenneth, but in Grayson Wilde's mansion. The events of the previous night came rushing back: the private investigator, Kenneth's lies, and Grayson's unexpected offer of protection. She dressed quickly in the clothes Grayson had provided, another oversized t-shirt and sweatpants that she had to roll up several times at the waist. As she made her way downstairs, she could hear Grayson's voice coming from what she assumed was his office. He sounded tense, his words clipped and authoritative. "I don't care what it costs," he was saying. "I want the security system upgraded by the end of the day." There was a pause. "No, I don't need to explain why, just get it done." Raina hesitated outside the door, not wanting to interrupt. Before she could decide whether to knock, Grayson emerged, looking startled to find her there. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked, his voice sharper than she expected. "I just arrived," Raina said, taken aback by his tone. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop." Grayson's expression softened slightly. "Sorry, I'm not used to having someone else in the house." "I understand," Raina said, though she didn't. Not really. Who chose to live completely alone in a mansion this size? "I was just looking for the kitchen. I thought I'd make breakfast." "Follow me," Grayson said, leading the way down the corridor. In the kitchen, Raina busied herself preparing a simple breakfast of eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. She could feel Grayson watching her, his gaze intense but unreadable. "You don't have to cook for me," he said finally. "I want to," Raina replied, not looking up from the eggs she was scrambling. "It's the least I can do after you've offered me sanctuary." "Is that what I've done?" Grayson asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Offered sanctuary?" Raina turned to face him. "Isn't it? You're protecting me from Kenneth, a man you don't even know, based solely on my word." Grayson's expression darkened. "I know his type. Men like that, men who send private investigators with fabricated stories to track down women who've left them. They don't change. They don't stop." There was something in his voice, a personal edge that made Raina wonder who had hurt him. But before she could ask, Grayson changed the subject. "I've arranged for some clothes for you," he said. "They should be delivered this afternoon. I had to guess your size." "Thank you," Raina said, touched by his thoughtfulness despite his gruff manner. "That's very kind." "It's practical," Grayson corrected her. "You can't keep wearing my clothes." After breakfast, Grayson retreated to his office, leaving Raina to explore the mansion on her own. The place was enormous, with over 20 rooms spread across 3 floors. Many were closed off, covered in dust sheets, but the ones that were furnished showed exquisite taste, a blend of antiques and modern pieces that somehow worked together. In the library, Raina found herself drawn to the family photographs displayed on a side table. They showed a younger, happier Grayson, with an older couple she assumed were his parents, and a beautiful young woman with long, dark hair and a radiant smile. "That's Charlotte," Grayson's voice came from behind her, making Raina jump. "My sister. She's beautiful," Raina said, studying the woman's face. "Do you see her often?" Pain flashed across Grayson's features. "She died 2 years ago." "I'm so sorry," Raina said, immediately regretting her question. "I didn't mean to pry." "You couldn't have known," Grayson said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. He took the photograph from her hands and replaced it on the table. "She was the reason I built Wild Technologies. She had a rare form of muscular dystrophy. I wanted to develop assistive technology to help her and others like her." "That's incredible," Raina said softly. "You must have loved her very much." "She was the best of us," Grayson replied, his gaze distant. "After she died, I couldn't bear to be in the public eye anymore. The sympathy, the questions. So I retreated here. And your parents? Raina asked gently. They died in a car accident when I was 25. Charlotte was all I had left. His voice was flat, as if he'd trained himself not to feel the pain of those words. Raina wanted to reach out to him, to offer comfort, but something told her Grayson would reject it. Instead, she asked, "Is that why you're helping me, because of Charlotte?" Grayson looked at her, really looked at her for what felt like the first time. "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe I just recognize someone who needs a second chance." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Grayson immediately tensed. "Stay here," he ordered, moving swiftly toward the foyer. Raina's heart pounded. Had the private investigator returned? Or worse, had Kenneth found her already? She couldn't help herself. She crept to the doorway of the library, straining to hear the conversation at the front door. To her relief, it was only the delivery of clothes Grayson had promised. When he returned with several shopping bags, Raina couldn't suppress a laugh at the incongruity of the stern, reclusive man carrying designer shopping bags. "What's so funny?" Grayson asked, one eyebrow raised. "Nothing," Raina said, trying to compose herself. "It's just, thank you. This is very thoughtful." "Like I said, practical," Grayson replied, but there was a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You should try them on, make sure they fit." The clothes were simple but elegant. Jeans, sweaters, t-shirts, and even a dress or two. Everything was exactly her size, making her wonder how Grayson had guessed so accurately. There was even a package of undergarments, which made Raina blush slightly at the thought of Grayson selecting them. She changed into a pair of jeans and a soft blue sweater, relieved to finally have clothes that fit. When she returned to the main floor, she found Grayson in his office, focused intently on his computer screen. "They fit perfectly," she said from the doorway. "Thank you." Grayson looked up, and for a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "Good," he said simply, then hesitated before adding, "You look nice." Coming from him, it felt like high praise. Raina smiled, feeling her cheeks warm slightly under his gaze. "I've been thinking," Grayson continued, closing his laptop, "we need to learn more about your fiancé, ex-fiancé," he corrected himself. "The more we know about what we're dealing with, the better we can prepare." "What do you want to know?" Raina asked, taking a seat in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "Everything. How you met, what kind of man he is, why you were afraid enough to run." Raina took a deep breath. She hadn't talked about Kenneth to anyone, not even her closest friends, but Grayson was risking his privacy, his sanctuary, to help her. He deserved the truth. "I met Kenneth at a charity gala my father's law firm was hosting," she began. "He was charming, successful, everything my parents wanted for me. At first, I was flattered by his attention. He sent flowers to my office every day, took me to the best restaurants, introduced me to all the right people." She paused, remembering how quickly it had all happened. "He proposed after only 4 months. I should have said no, but my parents were so happy. They saw it as the perfect match. His family's money and influence combined with my father's legal connections. A power couple, as my father kept saying." "When did you realize it wasn't right?" Grayson asked, his eyes never leaving her face. "It was gradual," Raina admitted. "Little things at first. He'd check my phone while I was in the shower. He'd question me about male colleagues at work. He'd get angry if I was late meeting him, even by a few minutes." She twisted her hands in her lap. "Then, about 2 months ago, I ran into an old college friend for coffee. A male friend. Kenneth found out, I still don't know how, and he was waiting at my apartment when I got home. He didn't yell, didn't threaten me. He just looked at me with this cold, controlled anger and said, 'If you ever embarrass me like that again, you'll regret it.' Something in his voice terrified me." "Did he hurt you?" Grayson asked, his voice tight. "Not physically," Raina said quickly. "But after that, he insisted I quit my job at my father's firm. He said I wouldn't need to work after we were married. When I objected, he went behind my back to my father, who agreed with him. By then, the wedding plans were in full swing, and everyone kept telling me how lucky I was." "But you knew better," Grayson observed. "I knew I was being slowly erased," Raina said softly. "My job, my friends, my independence, it was all slipping away. The final straw came the night before the wedding. Kenneth had had too much to drink at the rehearsal dinner. On the way back to my apartment, he started talking about our future, about how I would be the perfect Blackwood wife, how I would give him sons to carry on the family name." She shuddered at the memory. "He had our entire lives planned out, down to where our children would go to school. When I tried to suggest I might want something different, he grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised and said, 'You'll do as you're told, Raina. That's the deal.' Grayson's expression had hardened as she spoke, his hands clenched on the desk. And your parents? They didn't see any of this. They saw what they wanted to see, Raina said with a sad smile. A successful man who would give their daughter the life they thought she deserved. Besides, my father has business connections with the Blackwood family. The marriage was as much a merger as a union. So you ran, Grayson said. It wasn't a question. So I ran, Raina agreed. Without a plan, without thinking it through. I just knew I couldn't go through with it. You did the right thing, Grayson said firmly. Men like Kenneth Blackwood don't change. They only get worse once they feel they own you. The conviction in his voice made Raina wonder again about his past, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "What do we do now? Kenneth won't stop looking for me. He hates losing, and in his mind, I belong to him." "First, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with," Grayson said, pulling out his phone. "I'm going to have someone look into Kenneth Blackwood and his family. Money and influence can buy a lot of things, including the ability to cover up past indiscretions. Let's see if your ex-fiancé has a history we can use." "Use for what?" Raina asked, confused. "Leverage," Grayson replied grimly. "If he wants to play dirty, spreading lies about your mental health, we need to be prepared to hit back." The ruthless edge in his voice should have alarmed Raina, but instead, she felt oddly comforted. For the first time since fleeing her wedding, she wasn't alone. As the days passed, Raina and Grayson fell into an unexpected routine. She cooked meals, explored the grounds when weather permitted, and slowly brought life back to rooms that had been closed for years. Grayson continued to work from his office, but emerged more frequently, as if drawn to the warmth she brought to his cold, empty home. One evening, about a week after her arrival, they were having dinner in the formal dining room when Grayson's phone rang. He answered it, listened intently, then thanked the caller before hanging up. "That was my investigator," he said, his expression grim. "He's been looking into Kenneth Blackwood." "And?" Raina asked, setting down her fork. "It seems your ex-fiancé has a history of problematic relationships. 3 previous engagements, all ended under mysterious circumstances. There are also 2 sealed court cases involving restraining orders." "Restraining orders," Raina repeated, feeling sick. "Against Kenneth?" "Yes," Grayson confirmed. "Both filed by ex-girlfriends, both mysteriously withdrawn after large sums of money changed hands." "I had no idea," Raina whispered, thinking of how close she had come to marrying this man. "There's more," Grayson continued. "He's been telling everyone that you had a nervous breakdown, that the pressure of the wedding triggered a pre-existing mental condition, and that he's desperately worried about your safety." Raina felt a surge of anger. "That's absurd. I've never had mental health issues." "It's a tactic," Grayson explained. "If he can convince people you're unstable, then your actions, leaving him at the altar running away, seem like the actions of someone who isn't thinking clearly. It makes him the concerned fiancé rather than the controlling abuser." "What about my parents?" Raina asked, dreading the answer. "Do they believe him?" Grayson hesitated, which told Raina everything she needed to know. "They do, don't they?" she said, her voice hollow. "They're making public appeals for you to come home to get the help you need," Grayson said gently. "I'm sorry, Raina." Tears stung her eyes. Even now, her parents chose to believe Kenneth over their own daughter. It shouldn't have surprised her, but the betrayal cut deep. "Hey," Grayson said, reaching across the table to take her hand. It was the first time he had touched her voluntarily, and the warmth of his skin against hers was startling. "We'll figure this out, I promise." Something had changed between them over the past week. The cold, distant man who had found her huddled on his staircase had slowly revealed glimpses of warmth, even tenderness. And Raina, despite her situation, found herself drawn to him in a way she had never been drawn to Kenneth or any man before. "There's something else you should know," Grayson said, withdrawing his hand. "Kenneth has hired more than one private investigator. He's put a substantial reward out for information on your whereabouts." "How substantial?" Raina asked. $100,000, Grayson replied. Raina felt the blood drain from her face. "That's excessive." "It's not about the money for him," Grayson said. "It's about control. He can't stand that you defied him, that you escaped. Men like that, they see relationships as ownership." "You seem to know a lot about men like Kenneth," Raina observed. Grayson's expression closed off. "I've seen the type before." Before Raina could press further, the sound of the security system broke the tension. A red light flashed on a panel on the wall, indicating a breach at the perimeter of the property. Grayson was on his feet instantly. "Stay here," he ordered, moving swiftly toward his office. Rayner followed despite his command, watching as he pulled up security camera footage on his computer. The screens showed a dark figure moving through the trees at the edge of the property. "Is it him?" Rayner asked, her voice barely a whisper. "No," Grayson said, his eyes narrowed. "It looks like a photographer. See the camera." He pointed to the screen where the figure was indeed carrying what appeared to be a professional camera with a long lens. "A paparazzo," Grayson spat the word. "Looking for a story, or worse, trying to collect that reward." He picked up his phone and pressed a button. "Security breach in Sector 7, he said tersely. "Handle it." "You have security guards?" Rayner asked, surprised. "Of course," Grayson replied. "Did you think I relied solely on electronic systems? I value my privacy too much for that." Within minutes, the security camera showed two men in dark clothing intercepting the photographer, confiscating his camera, and escorting him off the property. "They won't hurt him, will they?" Rayner asked, concerned. "They'll just scare him a little," Grayson assured her. "Make sure he understands that trespassing here has consequences. They'll delete his photos and send him on his way." "This is all my fault," Rayner said, sinking into a chair. "I've brought this trouble to your doorstep. Maybe I should leave, find somewhere else to hide." "No," Grayson said firmly. "This is exactly what Kenneth wants, to flush you out, to make you feel unsafe anywhere you go. Besides," he added, his voice softening slightly, "you're not the only one who benefits from this arrangement." "What do you mean?" Rayner asked, looking up at him. Grayson seemed uncomfortable, as if he'd said more than he intended. "Just that it's been not unpleasant, having someone else here." Coming from him, it was practically a declaration. Rayner felt her heart flutter unexpectedly. "Well, I'm glad I'm not entirely a burden," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "You're not a burden at all," Grayson said quietly. "You're the first person in 2 years who hasn't looked at me with pity or curiosity or greed. Do you know how rare that is?" The vulnerability in his voice touched something deep inside Rayner. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his cheek gently. "I see you, Grayson Wilde. Not your money, not your reputation, not your past. Just you." For a moment, it seemed like he might pull away from her touch. Instead, he covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press his lips against her palm, in a gesture so intimate it took her breath away. "Rayner," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. The ringing of his phone shattered the moment. Grayson pulled away, clearing his throat as he answered. His expression changed as he listened, becoming hard and focused. "When?" he demanded of the caller. "Are you sure?" "Send everything to my secure email." He hung up and turned to Rayner, his eyes intense. "That was my contact in the city. Kenneth Blackwood is holding a press conference tomorrow. He's going to make a public appeal for information about you, playing the role of the devastated fiancé concerned about his mentally unstable bride." "He can't do that," Rayner protested. "It's slander." "He can and he will," Grayson said grimly, "unless we stop him." "How?" Rayner asked, feeling helpless in the face of Kenneth's money and influence. Grayson's smile was cold and determined. "By beating him at his own game. I've been keeping a low profile for 2 years, but Grayson Wilde stepping back into the public eye would be news. Big news." "What are you suggesting?" Rayner asked, not following his train of thought. "I'm suggesting we take control of the narrative," Grayson explained. "Before Kenneth can paint you as mentally unstable, we reveal the truth about who he really is. My investigator has found enough dirt to bury him 10 times over. Won't that just make him angrier, more determined to find me?" Rayner asked, afraid of poking the bear. "Possibly," Grayson admitted, "but it will also put him on the defensive. Right now he's controlling the story. We need to change that." Rayner wasn't convinced. The thought of a public battle with Kenneth terrified her. He had always been obsessed with his public image, and attacking it would be like declaring war. "There's something you're not telling me," she said, studying Grayson's face. "This isn't just about helping me, is it? There's something personal in this for you." Grayson was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. "You're right, there is." He moved to the window, staring out into the darkness. 2 years ago, before I retreated from public life, I was engaged to a woman named Elise Morgan. She was beautiful, connected, perfect for the image of wild technologies I was trying to project. But she was also ambitious, ruthless even. I was blind to it at first, too caught up in building my company. Rayner remained silent, sensing that whatever Grayson was about to reveal was something he rarely, if ever, discussed. "My sister Charlotte never liked Elise," he continued. "She tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. After Charlotte died, I was devastated. I withdrew from everything, including my relationship with Elise. That's when she showed her true colors. His voice hardened. She started rumors that I was mentally unstable with grief, that I needed help. She convinced my board of directors that I was unfit to lead the company. There was talk of having me declared incompetent. That's terrible, Raina said softly. It was calculated, Grayson replied. With me out of the way, she would have controlled my shares through marriage, effectively taking over Wild Technologies. When I realized what she was doing, I broke off the engagement and left New York. I've been hiding here ever since, letting the world think whatever it wants about Grayson Wild, the reclusive tech genius who lost his mind after his sister died. But that's not true, Raina protested. No, it's not, Grayson agreed, turning back to face her. Just like the things Kenneth is saying about you aren't true. The difference is I chose to walk away. You shouldn't have to. The parallel between their situations wasn't lost on Raina. Both of them had been betrayed by people they should have been able to trust. Both had been the targets of manipulation and lies. So this is about redemption for both of us, she said, understanding dawning. You've been hiding for 2 years because of what Elise did. You don't want me to make the same mistake. Something like that, Grayson admitted. But it's more than that now. He stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. I care about what happens to you, Raina. More than I expected to. More than I should. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken emotion. Raina felt her heart racing, unsure how to respond. In just over a week, this man had become more important to her than she could have imagined. I care about you too, she said simply. Grayson reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. Then trust me. Let me help you fight back against Kenneth. Together, we can ensure he never threatens you again. Raina leaned into his touch, finding strength in his certainty. What do we do? We prepare for war, Grayson said, his voice soft but determined. Tomorrow, while Kenneth is giving his press conference, painting himself as the victim, we'll be meeting with my lawyer and a trusted reporter. We'll tell the real story, about Kenneth's history, about his lies, about why you really ran. Won't it be my word against his? Raina asked. He's a Blackwood. People will believe him. Not when they see the evidence my investigator has uncovered, Grayson assured her. Trust me, Kenneth Blackwood is not as clean as his public image suggests. As they discussed the details of their plan, Raina felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The thought of standing up to Kenneth was terrifying, but the alternative, running forever, looking over her shoulder, was worse. Later that night, as Raina prepared for bed in her room in the East Wing, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Grayson standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I wanted to make sure you're okay, he said. Tomorrow will be difficult. I'm scared, Raina admitted, but also relieved in a way. Living in fear is exhausting. Grayson nodded, understanding in his eyes. I know. An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken feelings. Finally, Grayson cleared his throat. Well, good night then, he said, turning to leave. Grayson, Raina called softly, stopping him. Thank you for everything. He looked back at her, his expression softening. You don't have to thank me. If anything, I should thank you. For what? Raina asked, genuinely puzzled. For bringing life back to this house, Grayson said. For reminding me there's more to existence than hiding from the past. Before Raina could respond, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his lips lingering just long enough to make her heart skip a beat. Sleep well, Raina, he whispered, before disappearing down the dark corridor. Raina closed the door, her fingers touching the spot where his lips had been. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Whatever happened tomorrow, she wouldn't face it alone. Morning arrived with grey skies and a steady rain that matched the solemnity of the day ahead. Raina dressed carefully in one of the outfits Grayson had bought her, a simple navy blue dress that made her look professional and composed, nothing like the unstable woman Kenneth was portraying her to be. When she came downstairs, she found Grayson in the foyer, speaking with a distinguished-looking older man in an expensive suit and a younger woman with sharp eyes and a notebook. Raina, Grayson said, turning as she approached. This is Harold Morris, my attorney, and Sophia Chen from the New York Times. Raina shook hands with both of them, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Ms. Ellis, Harold said, his voice kind but professional. Mr. Wilde has briefed me on your situation. I want you to know that what Kenneth Blackwood is doing, spreading false information about your mental health, is not only reprehensible, but potentially actionable. And I'm here because this story needs to be told, Sophia added. Powerful men silencing women through intimidation and character assassination is, unfortunately, nothing new. But in this case, we have the evidence to fight back. Evidence? Raina asked, looking to Grayson. He nodded, leading them all into the study where several files were laid out on his desk. Court records, witness statements, financial transactions, all pointing to a pattern of controlling behavior and cover-ups by Kenneth Blackwood. As they went through the documents, Raina felt sick. There were statements from 3 different women describing relationships with Kenneth that had followed the same pattern: charm followed by control, isolation, and intimidation. There were financial records showing large payments to these women coinciding with the withdrawal of restraining orders and the signing of non-disclosure agreements. "This is who you were going to marry," Grayson said gently, seeing the shock on her face. "I had no idea," Raina whispered. "How could I have been so blind?" "Men like Blackwood are expert manipulators," Harold said. "They show you exactly what you want to see until they have you where they want you." "The question now," Sophia said, her pen poised over her notebook, "is how much of this you're willing to make public. This is your story, Ms. Ellis. You control how it's told." Raina looked at the evidence spread before her, then at Grayson, whose eyes held nothing but support and belief in her. She thought about other women who might fall into Kenneth's trap, about the power of truth against lies. "All of it," she said firmly. "Tell all of it." As they worked on crafting the story, Grayson's phone buzzed with a news alert. He checked it, his expression darkening. "Kenneth's press conference has started," he said, turning on a television mounted on the wall of his study. There on the screen was Kenneth Blackwood, looking appropriately distressed in a perfectly tailored suit. Beside him stood Raina's parents, her mother dabbing at tears with a handkerchief. "My fiancée Raina Ellis has been missing for 10 days now," Kenneth was saying, his voice breaking in what Raina knew was a calculated display of emotion. "We are desperately worried about her. Raina has been struggling with her mental health for some time, and the stress of our wedding appears to have triggered a serious episode." Raina watched, numb, as Kenneth painted a picture of her as fragile, unstable, in need of help. He spoke of his love for her, his concern, his desire only to bring her home safely. "If anyone has seen Raina, or has information about her whereabouts, please contact us immediately," he concluded, looking directly into the camera. "Raina, if you're watching this, please come home. I love you, we all love you, we just want to help you." The press erupted with questions, which Kenneth fielded with practiced concern. When asked about the possibility that Raina had left willingly, he shook his head sadly. "Raina wasn't in her right mind," he said. "Anyone who knows her would tell you she would never abandon her family, her friends, her future like this. Something is very wrong and we're afraid for her safety." Grayson turned off the television, his expression hard. "And that," he said to Sophia, "is what we're up against. A masterclass in manipulation." "It won't work," Sophia assured them. "Not once my article comes out. I have enough here to write a piece that will make Kenneth Blackwood's true nature crystal clear." "When will it be published?" Raina asked. "I can have it ready for tomorrow's edition," Sophia promised. "The Times doesn't take accusations like these lightly, but the evidence is compelling. Plus," she added with a small smile, "Grayson Wilde breaking his 2-year silence is news in itself. That alone guarantees placement." As Sophia and Harold prepared to leave, Grayson pulled Raina aside. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once the article is published, there's no going back. Kenneth will know you're fighting back." "I'm sure," Raina said, surprising herself with her certainty. "I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. It's time to stand up for myself." Grayson smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "You're braver than you know, Raina Ellis." After Sophia and Harold had gone, Raina and Grayson sat in the study, the weight of what they had set in motion hanging between them. "What happens next?" Raina asked. "We wait," Grayson replied. "Tomorrow, when the article is published, everything changes. Kenneth will be forced to defend himself instead of hunting for you. It won't stop him completely, but it will buy us time." "Time for what?" Raina asked. Grayson reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "Time for you to decide what you want your future to look like. Not what your parents want, not what Kenneth wants, but what you want." The question caught Raina off guard. She had been so focused on escaping her past that she hadn't given much thought to her future. What did she want? Freedom, certainly. The chance to pursue her dream of opening a restaurant, perhaps. And looking at Grayson's hand holding hers, maybe something else too. something she hadn't expected to find when she'd fled her wedding and stumbled upon this mansion in the storm. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have choices. Real choices." Grayson squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever you decide, I'll help you make it happen." The sincerity in his voice made Raina's heart swell. How strange that in running from a man who had tried to control her, she had found one who wanted only to set her free. As evening fell, they shared a quiet dinner, both lost in thoughts of what tomorrow would bring. The article would change everything, for Raina, for Kenneth, and for Grayson too, who was stepping back into the public eye after 2 years of seclusion. "Are you nervous?" Raina asked as they sat before the fire afterward. "About people knowing you're here, that you're back?" Grayson considered the question. "I'm not the same man who left New York 2 years ago," he said finally. "I'm not afraid of public opinion anymore, and if coming out of hiding helps you, then it's worth it." "Why?" Raina asked softly. "Why is helping me worth sacrificing your privacy, your peace?" Grayson looked at her for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames of the fire. "Because you remind me of what it means to be alive," he said finally. "To feel something other than grief and anger. When you came here in your wedding dress, soaking wet and defiant, you brought something with you that this house hasn't seen in years." "What's that?" Raina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hope," Grayson said simply. "You were brave enough to run from a life that was wrong for you, to face the unknown rather than surrender to a gilded cage. That kind of courage, it's rare." Raina felt tears spring to her eyes at his words. No one had ever seen her that way before, as brave, as strong. Kenneth had always treated her like something fragile to be protected and controlled. Her parents had seen her as a disappointment until she'd agreed to marry into the Blackwood family. But Grayson saw something in her that even she hadn't recognized. "I don't feel very brave," she admitted. "Most days I feel terrified." "That's what real courage is," Grayson said, reaching out to brush a tear from her cheek. "Being afraid but moving forward anyway." His touch lingered, and Raina found herself leaning into it, drawn to his warmth, his strength. The space between them seemed to shrink, the air charged with unspoken feelings. "Raina," Grayson whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Before either of them could say another word, a loud crash shattered the moment. The sound of breaking glass came from somewhere at the back of the house, followed by the blaring of the security alarm. Grayson was on his feet instantly, pulling Raina up with him. "Stay behind me," he ordered, moving swiftly toward his desk where he pressed a button beneath the surface. Within seconds, 2 security guards appeared at the study door. "Perimeter breach in the west garden, sir," one reported. "The cameras caught 2 men approaching the house." "Lock down the mansion," Grayson instructed, "and get Ms. Ellis to the safe room." "Safe room," Raina repeated, her heart pounding with fear. "Des precaution," Grayson explained quickly. "Marshall will take you there." The younger of the 2 guards stepped forward. "This way, Ms. Ellis." "No," Raina protested, grabbing Grayson's arm. "I'm not leaving you." "Raina, please," Grayson said, his eyes intense. "I need to know you're safe. I'll come for you as soon as we've secured the house." The urgency in his voice convinced her. She nodded reluctantly and followed Marshall down a corridor she hadn't explored before. He led her to what appeared to be an ordinary storage closet, but when he pressed his hand against a hidden panel, the back wall slid open to reveal a small, well-appointed room. "The safe room is fully stocked with supplies," Marshall explained as she entered. "The door is reinforced steel and there's a separate communication system." He pointed to a phone on the wall. "You can reach Mr. Wilde or emergency services from there." Before Raina could ask any more questions, he was gone, the hidden door sliding shut behind him with a solid thunk. Alone in the safe room, Raina paced anxiously. The space was surprisingly comfortable, with a small sofa, a refrigerator stocked with water and food, and even a bathroom tucked behind a door. But all she could think about was Grayson, out there facing whatever threat had breached the property. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Raina jumped at every faint sound from beyond the walls. Finally, the phone on the wall rang. She rushed to answer it. "Raina, it's me." Grayson's voice came through, clear and steady. "Everything's secure. You can come out now." Relief flooded through her. "How do I open the door from inside?" "Press the green button to the right of the phone," he instructed. Raina did as he said, and the hidden door slid open to reveal Grayson standing on the other side, his expression grim but composed. "What happened?" she asked as she stepped out of the safe room. "Who was it?" "2 men with cameras," Grayson replied, leading her back toward the main part of the house. "Not the same photographer as before. These were more professional." more determined. Sent by Kenneth? Raina asked, though she already knew the answer. Almost certainly, Grayson confirmed. They broke a window in the conservatory, but security apprehended them before they got further. The police have taken them into custody for trespassing. Will they tell the police why they were here? That they were looking for me? Probably, Grayson admitted. But without proof, it's just their word. And trespassing on private property is still a crime, regardless of their motivation. Raina wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the house. It's escalating, isn't it? First the private investigator, then the photographer at the edge of the property, now this. It is, Grayson agreed, not sugarcoating the situation. Kenneth is getting desperate. He knows the longer you're missing, the more questions people will ask. His press conference today was damage control, trying to shape the narrative before it slips away from him. And tomorrow, when Sophia's article comes out, Raina trailed off, the implications clear. Tomorrow we change the game, Grayson said firmly. But tonight we need to be extra cautious. I've doubled the security patrols and activated additional cameras around the perimeter. The intrusion had shattered the intimate moment they'd shared by the fire, replacing it with tension and uncertainty. Yet somehow Raina felt closer to Grayson than ever. In crisis, his true nature had emerged, protective, decisive, unwavering in his commitment to keeping her safe. I should get some rest, Raina said, though she doubted sleep would come easily after the events of the night. Tomorrow will be a big day. Grayson nodded. I'll walk you to your room. As they climbed the stairs to the east wing, Raina could feel the weight of unspoken words between them. At her door, she turned to face him. Will you be okay tonight, after everything that's happened? I'll be fine, Grayson assured her. I'm more concerned about you. I'm stronger than I look, Raina said with a small smile. I know you are, Grayson replied, his voice soft. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The compliment warmed her from within. On impulse, Raina rose on her tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss to Grayson's cheek. Good night, Grayson, and thank you for everything. He caught her hand as she started to pull away, his eyes dark with emotion. For a moment, Raina thought he might pull her closer, might turn that chaste kiss into something more. Instead, he brought her hand to his lips, kissing her palm as he had done once before. Sleep well, Raina, he murmured before releasing her hand and walking away down the darkened corridor. Inside her room, Raina leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. Despite the fear and uncertainty of her situation, despite the threat Kenneth still posed, she couldn't deny the feelings growing inside her for the complex, wounded man who had taken her in. Feelings that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the person Grayson truly was beneath his guarded exterior. Morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the stormy night. Raina dressed carefully, knowing that today would mark a turning point. When she went downstairs, she found Grayson in the kitchen, a newspaper spread out before him, his expression intent. Is that it? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Sophia's article. Grayson looked up, nodding. Front page of the New York Times. Runaway bride reveals truth behind Blackwood heir's facade. Sophia didn't waste any time. Raina approached slowly, almost afraid to see the words in print. The headline was bold, unmistakable, and beneath it was a split image. Kenneth at his press conference, looking concerned and sympathetic, juxtaposed with court documents from one of the restraining orders filed against him. Read it, Grayson encouraged, sliding the paper toward her. Raina sat down, her fingers tracing the words as she read Sophia's devastating expose. The article was meticulous, detailing Kenneth's history of controlling behavior, the payoffs to former partners, and the truth about why Raina had fled her wedding. It included quotes from one of Kenneth's ex-girlfriends who had broken her non-disclosure agreement to speak out, as well as a statement from Grayson Wilde, his first public comments in 2 years, vouching for Raina's mental stability and confirming she was safe and well. This is thorough, Raina said when she finished, feeling both vindicated and exposed. What happens now? Now we wait for the fallout, Grayson replied. Kenneth will deny everything, of course. He'll try to discredit the article, possibly even sue for defamation, but the evidence speaks for itself. And my parents? Raina asked quietly. Grayson's expression softened. That's harder to predict. They've been publicly supporting Kenneth's version of events. This article forces them to either continue that support in the face of damning evidence or admit they were wrong about the man they encouraged you to marry. Neither option seemed likely to Raina. Her parents had always valued appearance over truth, social standing over her happiness. She couldn't imagine them admitting they had pushed her toward a man who had hurt other women, who would have eventually hurt her too. "I don't think they'll ever forgive me for this," she said, the realization bringing both pain and strangely relief, for exposing Kenneth, for embarrassing them publicly. "If that's true," Grayson said gently, "then perhaps they don't deserve your forgiveness either." The words hit home. For her entire life, Raina had sought her parents' approval, had bent herself to fit their expectations. Maybe it was time to accept that their love had always been conditional, based on her compliance rather than her happiness. "You're right," she said, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I can't keep living for their approval. It's time I started living for myself." Grayson smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. "That sounds like a good plan." The ringing of his phone interrupted the moment. Grayson answered, his expression quickly shifting to concern as he listened. "When?" he asked the caller. "Are you certain?" "Yes. Keep me updated." He hung up, his eyes meeting Raina's. "That was my security team. Kenneth Blackwood just held an emergency press conference. He's denied all the allegations in the Times article and announced he's offering $500,000 for information leading to your safe return." $500,000, Raina gasped. "That's insane." "It's desperation," Grayson corrected. "He's losing control of the narrative, so he's escalating. The amount is designed to make headlines, to keep the focus on finding you rather than on the allegations against him." "Will it work?" Raina asked. "It might," Grayson admitted. "Money talks, especially that kind of money. We need to be prepared for increased attention on this property, more attempts to breach security." "I'm putting you in danger," Raina said, the realization hitting her hard. "You, your home, your privacy, all at risk because of me." "I made my choice," Grayson said firmly. "I chose to help you, to stand with you against Kenneth. I don't regret it." The conviction in his voice left no room for argument. Still, Raina couldn't help feeling responsible for the storm that was surely coming their way. Throughout the day, news of Kenneth's denial and the increased reward dominated the media. Grayson's security team reported multiple calls from journalists seeking to confirm if Raina was staying at the Wild estate, all of which were firmly denied. By evening, the tension had become almost unbearable. Raina found herself jumping at every sound, expecting another breach of the property, another attempt to find her. Sensing her anxiety, Grayson suggested they eat dinner in the conservatory, which overlooked the gardens at the back of the mansion, now fully repaired after the previous night's intrusion. "It's my favorite room in the house," he explained, as they entered the glass-enclosed space. Charlotte loved it too. She said it made her feel free, even when her illness kept her confined indoors. The conservatory was beautiful, filled with lush plants and comfortable seating, arranged to take advantage of the spectacular view. Dinner was simple, a meal Raina had prepared earlier, but the setting elevated it to something special. As they ate, Grayson shared stories about Charlotte, about their childhood in the mansion, about the dreams they'd had for wild technologies. Raina, in turn, told him about her grandmother who had taught her to cook, about the restaurant she'd always wanted to open, about the life she'd imagined for herself before her parents' expectations had overshadowed her own desires. For a few hours, they managed to forget the outside world, the threats and complications that awaited them. In the warmth of the conservatory, surrounded by living things, they were just a man and a woman getting to know each other, finding unexpected connections, building something neither had anticipated. After dinner, they remained in the conservatory, watching as darkness fell and stars appeared in the clear night sky. Raina found herself moved by the peaceful moment, by the contrast between the chaos of her situation and the serenity of this space. "Thank you for bringing me here tonight," she said softly. "It's exactly what I needed." "I thought it might be," Grayson replied. "Sometimes, even in the midst of a storm, you need to find moments of calm." He was sitting close to her on one of the comfortable sofas, their shoulders almost touching. In the dim light, his face seemed softer, the hard lines of stress and grief less pronounced. "How do you do that?" Raina asked. "Find calm in the storm? I haven't been very good at it," Grayson admitted. "Not since Charlotte died. I've been hiding rather than healing, using isolation as a shield against pain." "And now?" Raina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grayson turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight from above. "Now I'm learning that some risks are worth taking, that letting someone in doesn't always lead to more pain." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability, touched Raina deeply. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I'm learning that too, she whispered. This time, when Grayson leaned toward her, there was no interruption, no alarm, no crisis to pull them apart. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened, becoming something hungry and passionate. Raina responded eagerly, her arms circling his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Grayson rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the night you kissed my cheek, he confessed. Why didn't you? Raina asked, her fingers threading through his hair. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid of what I was starting to feel for you. Afraid that it was too soon, that you were too vulnerable. I don't feel vulnerable when I'm with you, Raina said. I feel strong, safe, like I can face anything as long as you're beside me. Grayson pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure about this, about us, with everything else that's happening? I've never been more sure of anything, Raina said firmly. The timing isn't perfect, our situation is complicated, but what I feel for you is real, Grayson. More real than anything I've ever felt before. His answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her to him again, his kiss deeper, more confident. Raina lost herself in the sensation, in the rightness of being in his arms. Later, as they walked hand in hand back to the main part of the house, Raina felt a strange sense of peace despite the uncertainty that still surrounded them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Grayson by her side. And for now, that was enough. The ringing of Grayson's phone broke the comfortable silence. He answered, his expression shifting from contentment to concern in an instant. When? He demanded. How many? No. Lock down the entire property. I'll be right there. He hung up, turning to Raina with grave eyes. Security just spotted multiple vehicles approaching the main gate. At least 3 cars, possibly more. Kenneth? Raina asked, her heart racing. Or media, Grayson said grimly. The reward has brought them out in force. We need to get to the security room now. Hand in hand, they hurried through the mansion to a room Raina had never seen before. It was filled with monitors showing different areas of the property, all currently displaying the main gate where indeed several vehicles had gathered. Is that? Raina began, peering at one of the screens. Yes, Grayson confirmed, his voice tight. That's Kenneth Blackwood himself, along with what looks like private security, and your parents are with him. Raina felt the blood drain from her face as she recognized the figures emerging from the lead car. Kenneth in an expensive suit, flanked by 2 burly men who were clearly not chauffeurs, and behind them, her mother and father, looking grim and determined. They've found me, she whispered, fear gripping her heart. They've come to take me back. Grayson's arm went around her shoulders, steadying her. They've found the property, he corrected, but they haven't found you. And they won't get past that gate unless I allow it? What do we do? Raina asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Grayson studied the monitors for a moment, his expression hardening as he watched Kenneth gesturing angrily at the intercom by the gate. We have 2 options, he said finally. We can refuse them entry, stay locked down and wait for them to leave. Or? Raina prompted when he hesitated. Grayson turned to her, his eyes intense. Or we can face them. Here on our terms with security present. We can end this confrontation once and for all. Face them? Raina repeated, the thought both terrifying and strangely liberating. You mean let them in? Only if you're ready, Grayson said, his voice gentle despite the urgency of the situation. Only if you feel strong enough to stand up to Kenneth, to your parents. I'll be with you every step of the way, but the decision has to be yours. Raina looked at the monitors again, at the man who had tried to control her, to own her. She thought about running, about hiding, about living in fear of being found. Then she thought about freedom, about standing her ground, about reclaiming her life. Let them in, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. It's time to end this. Grayson's eyes widened slightly at Raina's decision. Are you certain? Yes, Raina said, surprising herself with her own conviction. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. If Kenneth wants a confrontation, let's give him one, but on our terms, not his. Grayson nodded, pride evident in his eyes. He turned to the security team leader. Let them through the gate, but stop them at the main entrance. Full security presence, and I want every interaction recorded. Yes, sir, the man responded, immediately relaying the instructions through his radio. On the monitors, they watched as the massive iron gate slowly swung open. 3 vehicles proceeded up the long driveway, Kenneth's sleek black Mercedes in the lead, followed by what appeared to be security in an SUV, and a 3rd car containing what Raina recognized with a sinking feeling as her parents' driver. They'll be here in about 3 minutes, Grayson said, turning to Raina. Are you ready for this? Raina took a deep breath, steadying herself. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, Grayson said, taking her hands in his, you hold the power here. Not Kenneth, not your parents. You. They can't force you to do anything you don't want to do. His words gave her strength. Raina squeezed his hands gratefully, then released them, straightening her shoulders. Let's do this. They left the security room and made their way to the grand foyer. Through the tall windows flanking the front door, Raina could see the vehicles pulling up outside. Security personnel were already positioned on either side of the entrance, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. Stay beside me, Grayson murmured as they took their position at the bottom of the grand staircase. The doorbell rang, an elegant chime that seemed incongruously gentle for the confrontation about to unfold. One of the security guards opened the door, revealing Kenneth Blackwood standing on the threshold, his handsome face set in lines of practiced concern. I'm here to see Grayson Wilde, he announced, his voice carrying the entitled confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. The guard looked to Grayson, who nodded once. Mr. Blackwood, the guard said formally, you may enter. Your security detail must remain outside. Kenneth hesitated, clearly not pleased with this condition, but finally nodded. Wait here, he instructed the 2 men flanking him before stepping into the foyer. Behind him came Raina's parents, her father, Richard Ellis, his face stern beneath his silver hair, and her mother, Vivian, looking pale and drawn but impeccably dressed as always. As they entered, Kenneth's eyes scanned the foyer before landing on Raina. A complex series of emotions flashed across his face. Relief, anger, calculation, before settling into an expression of concerned affection that Raina now recognized as completely false. Raina, he said, moving toward her with his arms outstretched. Thank God you're safe. We've been so worried. That's far enough, Mr. Blackwood, Grayson said coolly, stepping slightly in front of Raina. You're here as a guest in my home, and only because Ms. Ellis has agreed to speak with you. Kenneth stopped, his expression hardening as he took in Grayson's protective stance. And you are? Grayson Wilde, Grayson replied, the owner of this property and a friend of Raina's. Friend? Kenneth repeated, his tone making the words sound like an accusation. Is that what you're calling it? You've been harboring my fiancé for nearly 2 weeks. Ex-fiancé, Raina corrected, finding her voice. I made that very clear when I left before the wedding. Raina, darling, her mother interjected, stepping forward with hands outstretched. You're not well. This episode, it's part of your condition. Kenneth has explained everything to us. My condition? Raina repeated incredulously. The condition he made up to control the narrative after I left him? Mother, there is no condition. I've never had mental health issues. That's a lie Kenneth created to save face. Raina, her father said sternly, that's enough. You've embarrassed this family beyond measure. It's time to come home and fix this mess you've created. Raina felt a flash of the old fear, the ingrained response to her father's authoritative tone, but then she felt Grayson's steady presence beside her, and her resolve strengthened. No, father, she said firmly. I'm not going anywhere with you or Kenneth. I left because I was afraid. Afraid of the controlling, manipulative man Kenneth really is behind his charming facade. Controlling? Kenneth repeated, his voice rising. I gave you everything. A beautiful home, expensive gifts, a life most women would kill for. Everything except freedom, Raina shot back. Everything except respect. You monitored my phone, isolated me from my friends, made me quit my job. You were creating a prison, not a marriage. This is absurd, Kenneth scoffed, turning to her parents. You see how irrational she's become? This is exactly what the doctors warned us about. What doctors, Kenneth? Raina demanded. Name one doctor I've ever seen for mental health issues. You can't because there aren't any. It's all a fabrication. An uncomfortable silence fell as Kenneth's jaw tightened. Raina could see the calculation in his eyes as he tried to find a way to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should all sit down, Grayson suggested smoothly, his calm voice a stark contrast to the tension filling the foyer. This conversation would be better continued somewhere more comfortable. I didn't come here for a social visit, Kenneth snapped. I came to bring my fiancée home. And as she's told you, Grayson replied, his voice hardening, she is no longer your fiancée, and this is her home for as long as she chooses to stay. Kenneth's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you admitting to the allegations in that hit piece the Times published, that you've been hiding Raina here? I'm not hiding, Raina interjected before Grayson could respond. I'm staying here as a guest. Of my own free will, because I was afraid of what you might do if you found me. Afraid? Kenneth repeated, looking genuinely baffled. Of me? Raina, I love you. I would never hurt you. Not physically, perhaps, Raina acknowledged. But there are other ways to hurt someone, Kenneth. To control them, to diminish them, to make them doubt themselves. I think we've heard enough, Richard Ellis interrupted, his voice cold. Raina, get your things. We're leaving. No, father, Raina said again, more firmly this time. I'm 27 years old. You can't order me to come with you. Richard looked stunned, unused to defiance from his daughter. Raina Elizabeth Ellis, I am your father, and you will do as I say. Richard, Vivian murmured, placing a restraining hand on her husband's arm. Perhaps we should listen to what Raina has to say. The unexpected support from her mother momentarily took Raina aback. Vivian Ellis had always deferred to her husband, had always pushed Raina to do the same. There's nothing to listen to, Kenneth cut in, his calm facade beginning to crack. Raina is confused, possibly being manipulated by this. A recluse. He gestured dismissively at Grayson. Do you even know who he is? What happened to his last fiancée? I know everything about Elise Morgan and what she tried to do to Grayson, Raina replied steadily. Just as I now know everything about your past, Kenneth. The restraining orders, the payoffs, the non-disclosure agreements. Did you think that would stay buried forever? Kenneth's face went pale, then flushed with anger. Those are lies, distortions. I have never harmed any woman in my life. Harm comes in many forms, Grayson observed quietly. Control, manipulation, intimidation. These can be just as damaging as physical abuse. Sometimes more so, because they leave no visible scars. Who the hell do you think you are? Kenneth snarled, turning on Grayson. Some technological hermit who hasn't shown his face in public for 2 years? You think you can judge me? I'm not judging you, Mr. Blackwood, Grayson replied evenly. I'm simply stating facts. Facts that are now in the public record thanks to the Times article. An article full of lies, Kenneth insisted, turning to Richard and Vivian. Surely you don't believe these absurd accusations. You know me. You know my family. Richard looked uncomfortable, caught between his social connection to the Blackwood family and the disturbing allegations against Kenneth. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding, he suggested weakly. There's no misunderstanding, Father, Raina said firmly. Kenneth is exactly who the article says he is, a man who uses his charm, his money, and his social position to control women, and when they try to leave, he discredits them, makes them seem unstable or greedy or vindictive. Is that why you ran? Vivian asked suddenly, her voice soft but steady. Because you were afraid of him. Yes, Mother, Raina said, grateful for the question, for the first sign that someone in her family might actually be listening to her. I knew that if I tried to break the engagement normally, Kenneth would find a way to pressure me into staying. Running was my only option. And you came here? Vivian continued, looking around the grand foyer of Wild Mansion. To a stranger? I came here by accident, Raina explained. I was caught in the storm, lost with nowhere to go. Grayson took me in, gave me shelter. How convenient, Kenneth sneered. The runaway bride just happens to find refuge with one of the richest men in the country, a man with his own history of failed relationships. That's enough, Grayson said, his voice taking on an edge that made Kenneth step back instinctively. You've said your piece, Mr. Blackwood. Now I suggest you leave before I have security escort you out. I'm not leaving without Raina, Kenneth declared, though his confidence seemed to be wavering. Yes, you are, Grayson replied calmly, because Raina has made her choice clear, and you have no legal right to force her to go anywhere. She's my fiancée, Kenneth exploded, his careful control finally shattering completely. I am not your fiancée, Raina stated clearly. I am not your possession. I am not going anywhere with you. Not today, not ever. You little... Kenneth started, taking a step toward her, his face contorted with rage. In an instant, 2 security guards appeared at his side, firmly but professionally restraining him. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises, one said. Kenneth struggled briefly before realizing the futility of his position. With visible effort, he composed himself, straightening his jacket as the guards released him. This isn't over, he said, his voice cold with suppressed fury. You've made a powerful enemy today, Wild. And you, Raina. He turned to her, his handsome face ugly with anger. You'll regret this. No one walks away from me. No one. Goodbye, Kenneth, Raina said, refusing to be intimidated by his threats. The security guards moved to escort Kenneth to the door. As he was about to leave, he turned back, his expression suddenly calculating. You know, Raina, Your father's law firm does a lot of business with Blackwood Financial. I'd hate to see that relationship damaged by this unfortunate situation. The threat was clear. If Raina didn't return with him, her father's firm would suffer the consequences. It was exactly the kind of manipulation Kenneth excelled at. "Are you threatening my family's livelihood, Mr. Blackwood?" Grayson asked mildly. "Because that would be a serious mistake. Wild Technologies has been considering a new legal team for some time. Perhaps Ellis and Associates would be interested in the position. I believe our business would more than compensate for any lost by Blackwood Financial." Kenneth's face went slack with shock. The Wild Technologies account would be worth 10 times what Ellis and Associates made from Blackwood Financial, and everyone in the room knew it. "You wouldn't," Kenneth said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Try me," Grayson replied simply. For a moment, Kenneth seemed at a loss for words. Then, with a final glare that encompassed both Raina and Grayson, he turned and stalked out of the mansion, followed by the security guards. An awkward silence fell in the foyer as Raina found herself alone with her parents and Grayson. Richard Ellis looked stunned, as if he couldn't quite comprehend what had just happened. Vivian, however, was studying her daughter with new eyes. "Did Kenneth really do those things the article mentioned?" she asked quietly. "Yes, Mother," Raina said. "And more. He was controlling, possessive, jealous. He isolated me from my friends, made me quit my job. He was already planning every aspect of my future without consulting me." "But why didn't you tell us?" Vivian asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Raina gave a sad smile. "Would you have believed me? You and Father were so excited about the match. The Blackwood name, the connections, the social standing. It was everything you'd always wanted for me." Richard Ellis cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We wanted what was best for you, Raina." "No, Father," Raina said gently but firmly. "You wanted what was best for the Ellis family reputation. There's a difference." Richard flinched as if she'd struck him. For the first time in her life, Raina saw uncertainty in her father's eyes. "Perhaps," Grayson suggested, "we should continue this conversation in the sitting room? I'll have tea brought in." Vivian nodded gratefully, and they followed Grayson to a comfortable room where a fire burned in the grate, despite the warm weather outside. Within minutes, a housekeeper appeared with a tea tray, setting it down before discreetly withdrawing. "You have a beautiful home, Mr. Wilde," Vivian said, accepting a cup of tea from Raina. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellis," Grayson replied politely. "It's been in my family for generations." "And yet you choose to live here alone?" Richard asked, his tone suggesting he found this peculiar. "Until recently, yes," Grayson said, his eyes meeting Raina's briefly. The implication wasn't lost on her parents. Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly, while Richard frowned. "Raina," her father said, setting down his untouched tea, "what exactly is your relationship with Mr. Wilde?" Before Raina could answer, Grayson spoke. "Your daughter came to my home seeking shelter from a storm, Mr. Ellis. I provided that shelter. In the process, we've become close." "Close," Richard repeated, his frown deepening. "And how long do you intend to stay here, Raina? Have you given any thought to your future?" "I'm still figuring that out, Father," Raina admitted. "But whatever I decide, it will be my choice this time. Not yours, not Kenneth's. Mine." Richard looked as if he wanted to argue but was restraining himself with visible effort. "And the scandal, the media attention. Have you considered what this is doing to our family name?" "Richard," Vivian said quietly but firmly, "I think we need to consider what Kenneth's actions have done to our daughter." Raina stared at her mother in surprise. Never in her life had she heard Vivian contradict Richard so directly. "What are you saying, Vivian?" Richard demanded. "I'm saying that perhaps we've been too focused on appearances and not enough on Raina's happiness," Vivian replied, setting down her teacup with a determined click. "If even half of what that article says about Kenneth is true, then we should be thanking God that Raina had the courage to leave when she did." Richard seemed taken aback by his wife's unexpected stance. "But the merger with Blackwood Financial is less important than our daughter's well-being," Vivian interrupted firmly. "Richard, look at her, really look at her. Have you seen Raina this confident, this sure of herself in years?" Richard turned to study his daughter, and for perhaps the first time, he seemed to really see her, not as an extension of himself or a piece in his social chess game, but as a person in her own right. "You seem different," he acknowledged reluctantly. "I am different," Raina confirmed. "Here, with Grayson, I've rediscovered parts of myself I thought were gone forever. I've remembered what it feels like to make my own choices, to be valued for who I am rather than what I represent." "And what about your career?" Richard asked. "You had a promising future at the firm." "I never wanted to be a lawyer, Father," Raina said gently. That was your dream for me, not mine. Then what do you want? Richard challenged. Raina took a deep breath. I want to open a restaurant. I've always wanted to. Cooking is my passion, the one thing that truly makes me happy. Grandmother knew that. She encouraged me to follow that dream. A restaurant? Richard repeated, looking stunned. But you have a law degree from Columbia, which I'll always have, Raina pointed out. But it's not where my heart lies. Richard shook his head, clearly struggling to process this revelation. And you, Mr. Wilde, what role do you see yourself playing in my daughter's future? Grayson looked at Raina, his expression softening. Whatever role Raina wants me to play. I care deeply for your daughter, Mr. Ellis. She came into my life unexpectedly, but I can't imagine it without her now. The simple declaration made Raina's heart swell. Despite the tension of the moment, she couldn't help but smile at him. I see, Richard said, observing the exchange with a calculating eye. And I suppose Wilde Technologies would be happy to finance this restaurant venture? Father, Raina exclaimed, embarrassed by the implied accusation. It's a fair question, Grayson said calmly. And the answer is yes, I would be honored to invest in Raina's restaurant if that's what she wanted. But I suspect she'd prefer to make her own way, at least initially. Your daughter has a remarkable independent streak, Mr. Ellis. It's one of the things I admire most about her. I don't need anyone to finance my dream, Father, Raina confirmed. I have savings. I'll start small, build from there. Vivian reached over to take her daughter's hand. Your grandmother would be so proud, she said softly. She always said you had her gift in the kitchen. The unexpected support brought tears to Raina's eyes. Thank you, Mother, she whispered. Richard looked from his wife to his daughter, then to Grayson. Something in his expression shifted, a grudging respect replacing his earlier hostility. Well, he said finally, it seems you've made up your mind. And if there's one thing I've learned in 30 years of practicing law, it's to recognize when a case is lost. This isn't about winning or losing, Father, Raina said. It's about me finding my own path, a path that apparently leads away from Kenneth Blackwood and toward Grayson Wilde, Richard observed dryly. A path that leads toward happiness, Raina corrected gently. Grayson is a part of that, yes, but so is my dream of opening a restaurant, of being true to myself. Richard nodded slowly, processing her words. And what of Kenneth's threats? He's not a man who accepts defeat gracefully. I'm aware, Grayson said, his voice hardening slightly. But neither am I. Raina will be safe here, and my legal team is preparing for any actions Kenneth might take. Your legal team? Richard repeated thoughtfully. I don't suppose Ellis and Associates might be of assistance in that regard? Grayson smiled slightly. As a matter of fact, Mr. Ellis, I was serious about considering your firm for Wilde Technologies' legal needs, assuming, of course, that there would be no conflict of interest given your daughter's relationship with me. Richard's eyes gleamed with interest. I'm sure we could work something out, he said, business instincts clearly engaged. Perhaps a meeting next week to discuss the possibilities. Father, Raina interjected, are you really negotiating a business deal right now? Merely exploring options, my dear, Richard replied, looking more like himself than he had since entering the mansion. If you're determined on this course, then we might as well make the best of the situation. It was so typically her father that Raina couldn't help but laugh. Some things never change, she said, shaking her head. On the contrary, Vivian observed, I think quite a lot has changed today. She rose from her seat, smoothing her skirt. Richard, I believe it's time we were going. Raina has made her decision, and we should respect it. Richard looked as if he wanted to argue, but finally nodded, standing as well. Very well, but Raina, he added, his voice taking on a note of genuine concern. Be careful. Kenneth Blackwood is not a man to underestimate. I know, Father, Raina said, touched by his worry. But neither is Grayson Wilde. As they moved toward the foyer, Vivian held back, gesturing for Raina to walk with her. Are you truly happy here? She asked quietly, when they were out of earshot of the men. Yes, Mother, Raina replied without hesitation. Happier than I've been in years. Vivian studied her daughter's face, then nodded, apparently satisfied with what she saw. Then that's what matters. I'm sorry if I pushed you toward Kenneth. I thought he was what you wanted. I wanted your approval, Raina admitted. I've spent my whole life trying to make you and Father proud. Oh, Raina, Vivian said, surprising her daughter by pulling her into a tight embrace. We've always been proud of you. Perhaps we haven't shown it the right way, but never doubt that. Tears pricked Raina's eyes as she returned her mother's hug. It was a rare moment of genuine connection between them, one she would treasure. At the front door, Richard shook Grayson's hand firmly. "Take care of her," he said, the words somewhere between a request and a command. "I intend to," Grayson replied seriously, "though I suspect Raina is quite capable of taking care of herself." "She is an Ellis," Richard acknowledged with a hint of pride, stubborn to the core. As the door closed behind her parents, Raina felt a curious mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The confrontation with Kenneth had been every bit as difficult as she'd feared, but facing her parents had been unexpectedly liberating. "Are you okay?" Grayson asked, coming to stand beside her. "I think so," Raina said, leaning against him gratefully. "That went better than I expected, actually." "Your mother surprised me," Grayson observed. "She's stronger than she appears." "Me too," Raina admitted. "I've never seen her stand up to my father like that before." "Sometimes people reveal hidden depths when the situation demands it," Grayson said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You certainly did." "I was terrified," Raina confessed. "When Kenneth walked in, looking so confident, so sure he could just take me away. For a moment I felt like that scared, insecure woman again. But you weren't," Grayson reminded her. "You stood your ground. You spoke your truth. You were magnificent." Raina smiled at the pride in his voice. "I had good backup," she said, leaning up to kiss his cheek. "Though I'm not sure threatening to take the Wild Technologies account to my father's firm was entirely fair." Grayson laughed. "It was effective, though, wasn't it? I've never seen someone pivot from righteous indignation to business networking so quickly." "That's my father," Raina said with a rueful smile, "always looking for the angle." "A useful trait in a lawyer," Grayson observed. "And speaking of your father's legal skills, he wasn't wrong about Kenneth. The threat has been addressed for now, but it's not over. Kenneth Blackwood doesn't strike me as a man who forgives or forgets." "What do you think he'll do?" Raina asked, sobering at the reminder. "I'm not sure," Grayson admitted, "but whatever it is, we'll face it together." The simple declaration warmed Raina from within. "Together," she repeated, liking the sound of it. "I never expected to find you when I ran from that wedding. And I never expected a runaway bride to change my life," Grayson replied, turning to face her. "But here we are." "Here we are," Raina agreed, gazing up at the man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "So what happens next?" "Next," Grayson said, taking her hands in his. "We live. We plan your restaurant. We refuse to let Kenneth Blackwood dictate our choices or dampen our happiness." His words were exactly what Raina needed to hear, a promise of a future determined by her own desires, not by fear or obligation. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." Grayson's answer was a kiss, gentle at first, then deepening as Raina responded eagerly. In his arms, the lingering fear from the confrontation faded, replaced by a sense of possibility, of hope. As the days passed, life at Wild Mansion settled into a new rhythm. The media frenzy surrounding Raina's story gradually subsided as newer scandals captured public attention. Kenneth maintained a conspicuous silence, neither confirming nor denying the allegations in the Times article. His absence from public events and social media sparked speculation, but Raina tried not to dwell on it. He was no longer her concern. True to his word, Richard Ellis met with Grayson to discuss legal representation for Wild Technologies. To Raina's surprise, her father seemed genuinely impressed by Grayson's business acumen and vision for his company. The professional relationship that developed between them helped ease the remaining tension in Raina's relationship with her parents. Vivian, too, made efforts to support her daughter's choices. She visited the mansion several times, getting to know Grayson better and even offering to help with Raina's restaurant plans. It was a new kind of relationship between them, one based on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. One morning, about a month after the confrontation with Kenneth, Raina sat in the conservatory, sketching ideas for her restaurant. The space was filled with light, plants thriving around her, much like her own renewed spirit. "Hard at work, I see," Grayson said, entering with 2 cups of coffee. Unlike before, when his presence had always carried an air of reserve, he now moved with a relaxed confidence, a man comfortable in his own home and his own skin. "Just dreaming," Raina replied, accepting the coffee gratefully, trying to picture what the space might look like. "And? What do you see?" Grayson asked, settling beside her on the wicker sofa. "Something intimate," Raina said, warming to her vision. "Not too large, maybe 40 seats at most. A place where the food is the star, where every dish tells a story." "It sounds perfect," Grayson said, his eyes reflecting genuine interest. "Have you thought about locations?" I've been looking at a few possibilities in the village, Raina admitted. There's a former bookstore on Main Street that might work. It needs renovation, but the bones are good. I know the place. Grayson nodded. It has potential. I'm going to look at it next week, Raina said. The real estate agent is meeting me there on Tuesday. Would you like me to come with you? Grayson asked. Raina hesitated. I think I'd like to do this first visit on my own. Is that okay? Of course it is, Grayson assured her, understanding in his eyes. This is your dream, Raina. You should approach it however feels right to you. His support meant everything to her. Kenneth would have insisted on accompanying her, would have tried to take control of the process. Grayson simply wanted her to succeed on her own terms. Thank you, she said softly, leaning over to kiss him, for understanding, for everything. You don't need to thank me for treating you with the respect you deserve, Grayson replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Though I won't object to more of those kisses as a token of your gratitude. Raina laughed, happy to oblige. Their relationship had deepened over the past month, growing from initial attraction into something profound and nurturing. They had both been wounded by past relationships, both carried scars that sometimes made vulnerability difficult, but day by day, they were learning to trust, to open themselves to the possibility of something lasting. Later that afternoon, as Raina was preparing dinner, a ritual she had come to love, the sound of the security system interrupted her concentration. She glanced at the panel on the kitchen wall, surprised to see a delivery notification, rather than a breach alert. Minutes later, Grayson entered the kitchen, a large envelope in his hand and an odd expression on his face. What is it? Raina asked, setting down her knife. A delivery from my investigator, Grayson replied, his voice carefully neutral. Information about Kenneth Blackwood that I think you should see. Raina felt a chill run through her. What kind of information? Grayson placed the envelope on the island between them. Financial records mostly. It seems Kenneth has been quietly liquidating assets, moving money offshore. What does that mean? Raina asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. It means he's preparing for something, Grayson said grimly. Possibly legal trouble. The Times article has sparked interest from regulatory agencies looking into Blackwood Financial's practices. So he's trying to protect his money, Raina concluded. Yes, but there's more, Grayson said, pulling out a sheet of paper from the envelope. This is a record of private investigators hired by Kenneth in the past 3 weeks. Not just the ones looking for you, others digging into my past, my company, my personal life. Raina's eyes widened. He's investigating you? Why? Revenge, most likely, Grayson said calmly. Or perhaps he's looking for leverage, something he can use against me. Against us. Will he find anything? Raina asked carefully. Grayson's expression softened. Nothing I'm ashamed of. My life has been scrutinized by the media for years. My mistakes are already public knowledge. Then what are you worried about? Raina pressed, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. Grayson hesitated, then sighed. One of the investigators specializes in corporate espionage. Kenneth may be targeting wild technologies rather than me personally. Understanding dawned. Because hurting your company would hurt you. Precisely, Grayson confirmed, and it would be a form of revenge he could enact from a distance without directly confronting either of us again. Can he actually damage wild technologies? Raina asked, concerned. Not easily, Grayson assured her, but we need to be vigilant. I've already alerted my security team to enhance cyber protections and review all access to sensitive information. Raina nodded, processing this new threat. Just when she had begun to feel safe, to believe that Kenneth had moved on, this reminder of his vindictive nature surfaced. Don't let this derail your plans, Grayson urged, reading her expression. That's exactly what Kenneth wants, to keep us looking over our shoulders, to rob us of our peace. You're right, Raina acknowledged, though the unease lingered. I won't give him that power. Good, Grayson said, gathering the papers back into the envelope. Now what can I do to help with dinner? His deliberate change of subject was exactly what Raina needed, a return to normalcy, to the life they were building together, despite Kenneth's shadow. You can chop the vegetables, she said, handing him a knife and a cutting board. Just don't get creative with the sizes this time. Uniformity matters in cooking. Yes, chef, Grayson replied with mock seriousness, earning a smile from Raina. As they worked side by side in the kitchen, Raina felt her equilibrium return. Whatever Kenneth was planning, they would face it together. She wouldn't allow fear to dictate her choices again. The following Tuesday, Raina drove herself to the village to meet the real estate agent at the former bookstore. It was a beautiful early summer day, the kind that made the world seem full of possibility. As she parked her car, a modest sedan Grayson had insisted on giving her for her independence, she felt a flutter of excitement. This could be the first concrete step toward her dream. The bookstore was exactly as she remembered it from her drives through the village, a charming storefront with large windows and an inviting entrance. Inside, however, it was a blank canvas, shelves removed, walls bare, waiting for a new purpose. "It needs work," the agent, a friendly woman named Carol, admitted as they toured the space. "But the location is prime, and the previous owner made significant upgrades to the plumbing and electrical systems before closing." "How many square feet?" Raina asked, already envisioning where the kitchen would go, how the dining area would be arranged. "Just under 2,000, Carol replied. "Plus, there's a small garden area in the back that could be used for outdoor seating in the summer months." Raina walked through the space slowly, absorbing its energy, its potential. It felt right, the perfect size, the perfect location, the perfect canvas for her vision. "I'd like to make an offer," she said decisively. Carol looked surprised. "Don't you want to discuss it with Mr. Wilde first?" Raina smiled, understanding the assumption, but appreciating the fact that Carol hadn't explicitly called Grayson her boyfriend or partner. Their relationship, though no longer a secret, was still private in many ways. "This decision is mine," Raina said firmly. "But yes, I'll discuss the details with him before finalizing anything." "Of course," Carol nodded, clearly impressed by Raina's confidence. "I'll prepare the paperwork for your review." As Raina left the bookstore, her mind buzzing with plans and possibilities, she didn't notice the dark sedan parked across the street, nor the man inside taking photographs of her with a telephoto lens. Her thoughts were entirely focused on her future, on the restaurant that would be hers and hers alone, a symbol of her independence, her rebirth after Kenneth. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't see the man until she nearly bumped into him on the sidewalk. "Excuse me," she began, then froze as she recognized the face before her. "Hello, Raina," said James Thornton, the private investigator who had come to Wilde Mansion that first night. "Fancy meeting you here." Raina stepped back, instinctively glancing around for an escape route. "What do you want?" "Just a conversation," Thornton said, his tone professional rather than threatening. "About Kenneth Blackwood." "I have nothing to say to you or to Kenneth," Raina replied firmly, moving to step around him. Thornton sidestepped, blocking her path. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. It concerns Mr. Wilde's safety." That stopped Raina cold. "What about Grayson? Has Kenneth threatened him?" "Not directly," Thornton said, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "But I have information you need to know. Information about what Kenneth is planning." "Why would you tell me this?" Raina asked suspiciously. "You work for Kenneth." "I worked for Kenneth," Thornton corrected. "Past tense. What he's asked me to do now crosses ethical lines I'm not willing to cross." Raina hesitated, torn between suspicion and concern for Grayson. "What kind of line?" "The kind that could put Mr. Wilde in legal jeopardy," Thornton replied. "Kenneth wants revenge, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process." "Tell me," Raina demanded, her heart racing. "And not here," Thornton said, glancing around again. "Meet me at the cafe on the corner in an hour. I'll explain everything then." Before Raina could respond, Thornton walked away, disappearing into the crowd of shoppers and tourists that filled the village streets on the sunny afternoon. Raina stood frozen, unsure what to do. Should she call Grayson? Should she meet Thornton as he suggested? Could she trust anything the investigator said, given his previous employment by Kenneth? As she debated her options, her phone rang. Grayson's name flashed on the screen, as if her thoughts had summoned him. "Hello," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Raina," Grayson said, an unusual urgency in his tone. "Where are you?" "In the village," she replied. "I just finished looking at the bookstore." "Why, what's wrong?" "My security team just picked up chatter about Kenneth Blackwood," Grayson explained, tension evident in his voice. "He's been seen in the area, and there's reason to believe he might try to contact you." Raina's blood ran cold. "Grayson," she said slowly, "I just ran into James Thornton, the private investigator. He said he has information about Kenneth planning something that could put you in legal jeopardy." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Where is Thornton now?" Grayson asked finally. "He left. He wants me to meet him at the cafe on Main Street in an hour." "Don't," Grayson said immediately. "It could be a trap. Stay where you are. I'm coming to get you." "What if he's telling the truth?" Raina pressed. "What if Kenneth really is planning something against you?" "Then we'll deal with it," Grayson assured her. "But not like this. Not with you meeting Thornton alone. It's too risky." Raina knew he was right, but the thought of Kenneth targeting Grayson because of her made her stomach churn with guilt and fear. "I'll wait for you," she promised. "I'm outside the bookstore on Main." "Don't move," Grayson instructed. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. As Raina ended the call, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The peaceful bubble they had built at Wild Mansion over the past month had been an illusion. Kenneth hadn't given up. He had simply been biding his time, planning his revenge carefully. She glanced up and down the street, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. Across the way, she noticed a dark sedan with tinted windows, a man visible behind the wheel. Was he watching her? Was it one of Kenneth's men? The sense of being hunted, of being in danger, came flooding back with overwhelming force. Raina stepped back into the shelter of the bookstore's entrance, trying to calm her racing heart. 15 minutes. She just had to wait 15 minutes for Grayson to arrive. But as she stood there watching the sedan across the street, a terrible thought occurred to her. What if Kenneth's target wasn't her at all? What if the threat to Grayson was real and immediate? What if this was all a distraction to keep them separated while Kenneth made his move? The fear that gripped her then wasn't for herself, but for Grayson, the man who had given her shelter when she had nowhere else to go, who had believed in her when no one else did, who had shown her what real love could be. As if to confirm her worst fears, her phone rang again. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With trembling fingers, Raina answered. "Hello, Raina," said a voice she had hoped never to hear again. "It's been too long." "Kenneth," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "You sound surprised," he said, a cold amusement in his tone. "Did you really think I would let you go so easily? That I would allow Grayson Wilde to take what's mine?" "I was never yours," Raina replied, finding her strength. "And whatever you're planning, it won't work. Grayson knows you're in the area. His security team is on alert." Kenneth laughed, the sound chilling in its confidence. "Oh, Raina, you still don't understand who you're dealing with, do you? By the time Grayson Wilde reaches you, it will already be too late." "What do you mean, too late?" Raina demanded, fear clutching at her heart. "Kenneth, what have you done?" "The question isn't what I've done," Kenneth replied smoothly. "It's what I'm about to do. Your precious Grayson Wilde thinks he's untouchable in that mansion of his, with his money and his security team. But everyone has vulnerabilities, Raina. Everyone has secrets." "If you hurt him," Raina began, her voice shaking with anger. "You'll what?" Kenneth interrupted, mockery in his tone. "Run away again. That seems to be your solution to everything, doesn't it?" Raina took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly despite her panic. "What do you want, Kenneth?" "What I've always wanted," he replied. "You, back where you belong, with me." "That's never going to happen," Raina said firmly. "Then Grayson Wilde will pay the price," Kenneth said, his voice hardening. "In exactly 1 hour, unless you meet me at the location I'm about to text you, certain evidence will be released to the SEC and the press, evidence suggesting that Wilde Technologies has been involved in insider trading and corporate espionage, evidence so compelling that not even Grayson's army of lawyers will be able to save his company." "That's a lie," Raina protested. "Grayson would never do anything illegal." "True or false doesn't matter," Kenneth said dismissively. "What matters is that it will look real enough to trigger an investigation, to tank Wild Tech's stock, to destroy everything he's built, unless you come to me, alone." Raina felt sick. "This is blackmail." "I prefer to think of it as negotiation," Kenneth replied. 1 hour, Raina, come alone or watch Grayson Wilde's life crumble before your eyes." The call ended abruptly, leaving Raina staring at her phone in horror. Seconds later, a text arrived with an address, a location she recognized as a vacant property on the outskirts of town, an old barn that had been on the market for years. Her mind raced. She needed to warn Grayson, to tell him what Kenneth was planning. But what if that only accelerated Kenneth's timeline? What if calling Grayson now triggered the release of the fabricated evidence immediately? And there was another, more painful thought. What if Grayson tried to stop her from meeting Kenneth? What if he insisted on handling this himself, on confronting Kenneth directly? The thought of the two men facing off, of Grayson putting himself at risk for her, was unbearable. No, she couldn't let that happen. She had run from her wedding to escape a life controlled by Kenneth, but she wouldn't run from this. She wouldn't let Grayson suffer for the choice she had made. Decision made, Raina stepped out from the shelter of the bookstore entrance and hailed a passing taxi. As she gave the driver the address Kenneth had sent, she cast one last glance down the street, searching for any sign of Grayson's car. But there was none. She still had time. I'm sorry, she whispered, turning off her phone as the taxi pulled away from the curb. The ride to the old barn took less than 20 minutes, but to Raina, it felt like hours. With each passing mile, her resolve strengthened. She wasn't the same frightened bride who had fled her wedding in panic. She had found her strength at Wild Mansion, in Grayson's belief in her, in her own rediscovered sense of self-worth. Whatever Kenneth had planned, she would face it with courage. The taxi dropped her at the entrance to a long, winding driveway that led to the barn. As she paid the driver, Raina glanced around, taking in her surroundings. The property was isolated, surrounded by fields that offered no cover, no place to hide. If Kenneth had chosen this location to ensure privacy, he had chosen well. "You want me to wait, miss?" the driver asked, looking doubtful. "There's nothing out here but that old barn." "No, thank you," Raina replied. "Someone's meeting me." The driver shrugged and pulled away, leaving Raina alone at the entrance to the property. Taking a deep breath, she began walking up the driveway toward the barn, her steps purposeful, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. The barn loomed ahead, its weathered wood and sagging roof a stark contrast to the lush green fields surrounding it. As Raina approached, she noticed a black Mercedes parked beside it, Kenneth's car. So he was already here, waiting for her. The large barn doors were partially open, revealing darkness within. Raina hesitated at the entrance, her instincts screaming at her to turn and run, but the thought of Grayson, of the damage Kenneth could do to him and his company, steeled her resolve. "Kenneth!" she called, stepping into the shadowy interior of the barn. "Right on time," Kenneth's voice came from the darkness. "You always were punctual." Lights suddenly flicked on, revealing the interior of the barn. Despite its dilapidated exterior, the inside had been partially renovated. A concrete floor, new support beams, and in the center, a small seating area with 2 chairs and a table. Kenneth stood beside one of the chairs, impeccably dressed as always in an expensive suit, his handsome face set in lines of satisfaction. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his. "I didn't come here to socialize," Raina replied, remaining where she was. "I came to stop you from destroying Grayson's company with fabricated evidence." "Fabricated?" Kenneth repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Who said anything about fabrication? Grayson Wilde may not be the paragon of virtue you believe him to be." "I know him," Raina said firmly. "He would never engage in illegal activities." "The way you knew me," Kenneth countered. "We all wear masks, Raina. Some are just better at it than others." Raina refused to be baited. "What exactly do you want from me, Kenneth?" "Simple," he replied, his tone businesslike. "You leave Wilde and come back to New York with me. We'll announce that you've been receiving treatment for your condition and are now ready to reschedule our wedding. In return, the evidence against Wilde Technologies never sees the light of day." "And if I refuse?" Raina asked, though she already knew the answer. Kenneth's smile was cold. "Then by this time tomorrow, Grayson Wilde will be watching his company's stock plummet as federal agents raid his offices. His reputation, his legacy, everything he's built, gone." "You're bluffing," Raina said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "You don't have anything on Grayson." "Am I?" Kenneth reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive, holding it up between his fingers. "Everything the SEC needs is right here. Emails, financial records, communications with competitors. Some real, some enhanced, but all damning. So your plan is to force me back into a relationship with you through blackmail?" Raina asked, disgust evident in her voice. "That's pathetic, Kenneth, even for you." A flash of anger crossed Kenneth's face, quickly masked. "Call it what you want. The fact remains, you have a choice to make, your freedom or Wilde's future." Raina felt a strange calm settle over her. In that moment, she saw Kenneth clearly, not as the powerful, intimidating figure she had feared, but as a small, insecure man who couldn't bear to lose. "No," she said simply. "No," Kenneth repeated, looking genuinely surprised. "Did you not hear what I just said? Wilde will be ruined." "I heard you," Raina confirmed, "and my answer is no. I won't go back to you, Kenneth. Not for any reason. Not at any price." Kenneth's face darkened. "You would sacrifice Grayson Wilde's entire company, his life's work, rather than come back to me." "I'm not sacrificing anything," Raina replied steadily, "because even if you release whatever fabricated evidence you have, Grayson will fight it, and he'll win." "You can't possibly know that," Kenneth scoffed. "I know Grayson," Raina said with quiet confidence. "I know his strength, his resilience. He lost his parents, he lost his sister, he almost lost his company once before. But he survived all of it, and he'll survive whatever you throw at him, with me by his side. Kenneth stared at her, something like genuine hurt flickering in his eyes. You never looked at me the way you look when you say his name, he said softly. Never. Because I never loved you, Raina admitted, the truth finally spoken aloud. I was trying to please my parents, to be the daughter they wanted, but with Grayson I'm just me, and that's enough. Kenneth's expression hardened again. Very touching, but sentimentality won't save Wild Technologies from an SEC investigation. Maybe not, came a new voice from the barn entrance, but I might have something that will. Raina whirled around to see James Thornton standing in the doorway, a tablet in his hand. Thornton, Kenneth said, clearly shocked. What the hell are you doing here? My job, Mr. Blackwood, Thornton replied calmly, stepping into the barn. Or rather, my former job. You see, when you hired me to dig up dirt on Grayson Wild, I did exactly that. I investigated thoroughly. Then you know I have what I need to destroy him, Kenneth said, holding up the flash drive again. What you have, Thornton corrected, is a collection of altered documents and fabricated emails that would never stand up to serious scrutiny. What I have, he continued, holding up his tablet, is proof that you ordered those alterations, paid for them, and directed the entire operation. The color drained from Kenneth's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Thornton turned the tablet to show a video playing, Kenneth in his office, giving explicit instructions to someone off-camera about altering documents related to Wild Technologies. I record all my client meetings, Thornton explained. Professional precaution. Most of the time those recordings stay in my private files. But when a client asks me to participate in what amounts to corporate sabotage and securities fraud, well, that's where I draw the line. You son of a... Kenneth lunged toward Thornton, but the investigator sidestepped easily. I wouldn't, Thornton advised calmly. Assault would just add to your legal troubles. And you're already facing quite a few, Mr. Blackwood. Kenneth froze, his face a mask of fury and fear. What do you want? Money? I can pay whatever Wild is paying you, and more. This isn't about money, Thornton replied. It's about doing the right thing. Something I should have considered before taking your case in the first place. So you're working for Wild now? Kenneth demanded. I'm not working for anyone at the moment, Thornton said. Just trying to correct a mistake. During this exchange, Raina had been inching toward the door, hoping to escape while Kenneth was distracted. But as she moved, Kenneth's attention snapped back to her. Don't even think about it, he snarled, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a small handgun. Raina froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Kenneth, don't do this, she pleaded. It's over, let it go. Over, Kenneth repeated, a strange, desperate laugh escaping him. It's not over until I say it's over. And if I can't have you, if I can't have my revenge on Wild, then what's the point? The gun wavered between Raina and Thornton, Kenneth's hand visibly shaking. The controlled, calculating man she had known was gone, replaced by someone unpredictable and dangerous. Put the gun down, Blackwood, Thornton said calmly. You're just making things worse for yourself. Worse? Kenneth laughed again, the sound chilling in its emptiness. How could it possibly get worse? My reputation is ruined, my engagement is over, and now you're threatening me with criminal charges. What do I have left to lose? Your future, came another voice from the doorway, a voice Raina recognized instantly. Grayson Wild stood silhouetted against the bright daylight outside, his tall figure imposing even from a distance. Wild, Kenneth spat, the gun now pointing directly at Grayson. How did you find us? You're not the only one who can hire investigators, Blackwood, Grayson replied, stepping into the barn. His eyes found Raina's, relief evident in them when he saw she was unharmed. Are you okay? He asked softly. I'm fine, Raina assured him, though her voice trembled slightly. Grayson nodded, then turned his attention back to Kenneth. It's over, Blackwood. The police are on their way. Thornton has already sent copies of his evidence to the authorities. Put the gun down before you add attempted murder to your charges. Kenneth's face contorted with rage. This is all your fault, he said, the gun still aimed at Grayson. You took her from me. You turned her against me. No, Kenneth, Raina said, finding her voice again. I left because of who you are, not because of Grayson. I would have left you anyway sooner or later. Grayson just gave me the strength to do it sooner. Liar! Kenneth shouted, his finger tightening on the trigger. Everything happened in a blur after that. Raina lunged forward, trying to reach Kenneth before he could fire. Thornton moved at the same time, attempting to disarm him from the side. Grayson shouted something, surging toward Raina. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the confined space of the barn. Raina felt herself being pushed to the ground, Grayson's body covering hers protectively. When she looked up, Thornton had Kenneth pinned to the floor, the gun kicked away to the far corner of the barn. "Grayson," Raina said frantically, her hands searching his body for any sign of injury. "Are you hurt? Did he—" "I'm fine," Grayson assured her, helping her to sit up. "The bullet missed everyone, thank God." Relief flooded through Raina, so intense she felt lightheaded. She clung to Grayson, burying her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "Why did you come here alone?" Grayson murmured against her hair. "Why didn't you call me?" "I was afraid," Raina admitted. "Afraid of what Kenneth might do to you, to your company. He said he had evidence, fabricated evidence." Grayson finished for her. "I know. Thornton contacted me after you left the village. He explained everything." Raina pulled back to look at him in surprise. "Then you knew about Kenneth's plan?" "Not until today," Grayson said. "But even if I had known earlier, it wouldn't have changed anything. Wild technologies can weather an investigation, but I couldn't bear to lose you, Raina." The simple declaration, spoken in the midst of chaos, brought tears to Raina's eyes. "I couldn't bear to lose you either," she whispered. "That's why I came. To protect you." Grayson's smile was tender as he brushed a tear from her cheek. "We protect each other," he corrected gently. "That's how this works." The sound of sirens in the distance broke the moment. Kenneth, still pinned beneath Thornton, had gone silent, his face a mask of defeated rage. "The police," Thornton observed, not loosening his grip on Kenneth. "Right on time." As Grayson helped Raina to her feet, she couldn't help but look at Kenneth, the man she had almost married, the man who had tried to control her, to own her. Now, subdued and awaiting arrest, he seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating. The hold he had once had over her was gone, broken by her own strength and by the love of the man standing beside her. "It's really over, isn't it?" she asked softly. "Yes," Grayson confirmed, his arm secure around her waist. "It's over." The aftermath of that day at the barn unfolded rapidly. Kenneth Blackwood was arrested on multiple charges: attempted assault, illegal possession of a firearm, corporate espionage, and attempted securities fraud. The evidence provided by James Thornton ensured that no charges would stick against Grayson or Wild Technologies. Blackwood Financial, the empire Kenneth had inherited and expanded, found itself under intense scrutiny from regulatory agencies. As investigations deepened, more questionable practices came to light, tarnishing not just Kenneth's reputation, but that of the entire Blackwood family. For Raina, watching the news reports of Kenneth's downfall brought a complex mix of emotions. There was relief, certainly, that he could no longer threaten her or Grayson, but there was also a strange sadness for the man he might have been, had power and privilege not warped him. "You're too compassionate," Grayson observed one evening, finding her watching yet another news segment about the Blackwood scandal. "After everything he did to you." "It's not compassion exactly," Raina tried to explain. "More like recognition. Kenneth could never accept losing, could never admit defeat. It consumed him, destroyed him. I just find it sad." Grayson considered this, then nodded slowly. "I understand, but I can't say I share your perspective." "Not after he pulled a gun on you." "That's fair," Raina acknowledged with a small smile. "I don't expect you to forgive him. I'm not sure I do either, completely. But I've made my peace with that chapter of my life. Now I'm ready to focus on the next one." The next chapter was already taking shape. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the barn, Raina signed the papers to purchase the former bookstore in the village. With Grayson's encouragement, she had decided to pursue her dream of opening a restaurant despite the recent turmoil. "Are you sure the timing is right?" her father had asked during one of his now regular visits to the mansion. "After everything that's happened with Kenneth, the timing is perfect," Raina had replied confidently. "I'm not going to put my life on hold because of Kenneth Blackwood. I've done that for too long already." Richard Ellis had looked at his daughter with newfound respect. "You've changed," he observed. "I've grown," Raina corrected gently, "into the person I was always meant to be." The restaurant renovations began immediately, with Raina overseeing every detail. She named it Charlotte's, in honor of Grayson's sister, a gesture that had brought tears to his eyes when she had proposed it. "She would have loved that," he had said, his voice thick with emotion, "and she would have loved you." "I wish I could have known her," Raina had replied softly. "In a way you do," Grayson had told her. "Charlotte lives on in this house, in my memories, in the work Wild Technologies continues to do, and now she'll live on in your restaurant too." As summer turned to fall, Raina divided her time between overseeing the restaurant renovations and making the east wing of Wild Mansion truly her own. What had begun as a temporary refuge had become home, and the man who had reluctantly taken in a runaway bride had become the center of her world. One crisp October evening, as golden leaves drifted past the windows of the conservatory, Grayson suggested they take a walk through the gardens. The night was clear, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, a full moon rising over the distant trees. "It's beautiful out here," Raina said, her arm linked through Grayson's as they strolled along paths illuminated by subtle landscape lighting. "I can see why Charlotte loved this place so much." "It was her sanctuary," Grayson agreed. "When her illness progressed and she couldn't leave the house anymore, these gardens became her world. She would sit for hours, just watching the seasons change, the flowers bloom and fade." Raina squeezed his arm gently, offering silent support as she always did when he spoke of his sister. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had softened over time, become a bittersweet ache rather than the sharp pain that had driven him into seclusion. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a small gazebo nestled among flowering shrubs. Fairy lights twinkled in the structure's framework, casting a warm glow over the interior. "This is new," Raina observed as Grayson led her up the steps into the gazebo. "I don't remember seeing it before." "I had it built last month," Grayson explained. "A surprise." Inside, Raina found a small table set for two, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket, and a vase of her favorite flowers, peonies despite them being out of season. "What's the occasion?" she asked, turning to Grayson with a curious smile. Instead of answering, he took both her hands in his expression suddenly serious. "6 months ago," he began, "a storm brought a runaway bride to my doorstep. She was soaking wet, exhausted, afraid, and the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." Raina felt her heart begin to race as Grayson continued. "I thought I was offering her temporary shelter," he said softly. "I didn't realize she would end up saving me from the prison I had built around myself. You brought light back into my life, Raina. You reminded me what it means to truly live, to feel, to love." Tears welled in Raina's eyes as Grayson released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "I know your last engagement ended badly," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice now, "and perhaps it's too soon to ask this. If it is, tell me, and I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need." He opened the box to reveal a ring unlike any Raina had ever seen. Not a traditional diamond solitaire like the one Kenneth had given her, but a unique design featuring a deep blue sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds, set in white gold. "Charlotte's birthstone," Grayson explained, seeing Raina's gaze fixed on the sapphire. "This was my mother's ring, redesigned for you, for us." Then, still holding her hand, he lowered himself to one knee. "Raina Ellis, I love you more than I ever thought possible. You've brought joy back into my life, purpose back into this home. Will you marry me? Not because it's expected, not because it's convenient, but because we choose each other, every day, for all the days to come." Raina felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but they were tears of happiness, of overwhelming love for the man kneeling before her. This proposal couldn't have been more different from Kenneth's, which had happened in a crowded restaurant, designed more for public approval than private joy. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Grayson, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms, Raina felt a profound sense of rightness, of coming home. This was what love should feel like, not possession, not control, but partnership, respect, joy. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepening with the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both breathless, Grayson rested his forehead against hers. "I thought I'd lost everything when Charlotte died," he murmured. "I shut myself away, convinced that isolation was safer than risking more pain. Then you came crashing into my life, and nothing has been the same since." "Good different or bad different?" Raina teased gently. "The best different," Grayson assured her, his smile illuminating his face in a way that still made her heart skip. "You were the storm I didn't see coming, the one that washed away all my carefully constructed walls." "And you," Raina replied, "were the shelter I never expected to find, my safe harbor in the storm." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the twinkling lights of the gazebo, Raina marveled at the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been a desperate bride fleeing a life that wasn't truly hers. Now she was a woman who had found her strength, her purpose, her voice. and a love that supported rather than suppressed her growth. The east wing of Wild Mansion, once cold and empty, now vibrated with life and possibility, and the runaway bride who had sought only temporary refuge had found instead a permanent home for her heart. Spring arrived with a riot of color in the gardens of Wild Mansion. Flowers bloomed along the winding paths, birds built nests in the ancient trees, and the air carried the sweet scent of renewal. In the east wing, sunshine poured through open windows, casting golden light across polished floors and comfortable furniture. It was in those rooms, once neglected and shrouded in dust, that Raina Ellis prepared for her wedding day. Not the lavish society affair Kenneth Blackwood had planned, but an intimate gathering of those who truly mattered in her life. "You look beautiful, darling," Vivian Ellis said, adjusting the simple veil in her daughter's hair. Their relationship had blossomed in recent months, growing from the formal, distant connection of the past into something genuine and warm. "Thank you, Mother," Raina replied, studying her reflection in the mirror. Her dress was nothing like the elaborate designer gown she had abandoned a year ago. This one was elegant in its simplicity, a sleek sheath of ivory silk that skimmed her figure, with delicate lace accents that caught the light when she moved. "Are you nervous?" Vivian asked, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from the dress. Raina considered the question, then shook her head. "Not at all," she said, and meant it. "This feels right in a way nothing else ever has." "I can see that," Vivian acknowledged with a smile. "The way you look at Grayson, the way he looks at you, it's what your father and I should have wanted for you all along. Not a strategic match, but a love match." "It's never too late to learn," Raina said, squeezing her mother's hand affectionately. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Richard Ellis, handsome in his formal suit, his expression softening as he saw his daughter. "It's time," he said simply. Raina took a deep breath, anticipation fluttering in her chest. Not fear, not doubt, just pure, joyful anticipation of the life that awaited her. The ceremony was to take place in the conservatory, which had been transformed for the occasion. Flowers filled every available space, their colors and scents creating a paradise of sensory delight. Chairs had been arranged in a semicircle, filled with a small group of guests, family, close friends, and a few key colleagues from Wild Technologies. As Raina made her way toward the conservatory on her father's arm, she couldn't help but reflect on the difference a year had made. Last April, she had been a frightened bride fleeing a wedding that felt like a prison sentence. This April, she walked confidently toward a future she had chosen, a man she truly loved, a life that honored who she was rather than who others wanted her to be. The doors to the conservatory opened, revealing Grayson waiting for her at the end of the petal-strewn aisle. His face, as he caught sight of her, transformed with such naked joy that tears sprang to Raina's eyes. This, she thought as she moved toward him, was what love looked like. Not possession, not control, not societal approval, but this moment of pure recognition between two souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed. As she reached Grayson's side, as he took her hands in his, as they spoke vows that were meaningful precisely because they were freely chosen, Raina felt a sense of completion that she had never known was possible. "I found you in a storm," Grayson said, as part of his vows, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "A runaway bride who brought light back into my darkness. You taught me that isolation isn't safety, that walls don't protect us, they imprison us. You showed me that real strength lies in vulnerability, in opening ourselves to love despite the risk of pain." Raina's own vows, when she spoke them, came straight from her heart. "I came to your door, seeking shelter from a storm, both literal and figurative. What I found was a home for my soul. You saw me, truly saw me, when I had spent years being invisible, even to myself. You gave me space to grow, to find my strength, to become the woman I was always meant to be. I promise to see you with that same clarity, to support your growth as you have supported mine, to choose you freely, joyfully, every day of our lives together." When the ceremony concluded, when they were pronounced husband and wife, when Grayson's lips met hers in a kiss that sealed their promises, Raina felt not the closing of a door but the opening of endless possibilities. The reception that followed was held throughout the ground floor of the mansion, with dinner served in the formal dining room and dancing in the grand foyer. Charlotte's, Raina's restaurant in the village, had catered the event, its first official function before the grand opening scheduled for the following week. As evening fell, as lights twinkled in the gardens and music filled the air, Raina found herself standing with Grayson on the terrace, taking a moment of quiet amid the celebration. "Happy?" he asked, his arms secure around her waist. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "You? More than I ever thought possible," Grayson admitted, pressing a kiss to her temple. "If someone had told me a year ago that I would be standing here, married to the most incredible woman I've ever known, planning to rejoin the world instead of hiding from it, I would have called them delusional." Raina laughed softly. "And if someone had told me I'd run from my wedding, find refuge with a reclusive tech genius, and fall madly in love with him, I would have had them committed." "Life has a way of surprising us," Grayson observed, his gaze moving to the gardens where his sister had once found joy. "Charlotte would have loved this, seeing the house full of life again, seeing me happy. She always said I was too serious, too focused on work." "She was right," Raina teased gently. "But I'm working on that." Grayson's answering smile was tender as he turned her to face him. "You've worked miracles already," he said softly. "The East Wing isn't the only thing you've renovated in this house. You've renovated me too." "We've renovated each other," Raina corrected, reaching up to touch his face. "That's what love does. It transforms us, makes us more ourselves, not less." As Grayson lowered his lips to hers, as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky above them, Raina Ellis Wilde knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The runaway bride had found her way home, the end for years. Her mind raced. She needed to warn Grayson, to tell him what Kenneth was planning. But what if that only accelerated Kenneth's timeline? What if calling Grayson now triggered the release of the fabricated evidence immediately? And there was another, more painful thought. What if Grayson tried to stop her from meeting Kenneth? What if he insisted on handling this himself, on confronting Kenneth directly? The thought of the two men facing off, of Grayson putting himself at risk for her, was unbearable. No, she couldn't let that happen. She had run from her wedding to escape a life controlled by Kenneth, but she wouldn't run from this. She wouldn't let Grayson suffer for the choice she had made. Decision made, Raina stepped out from the shelter of the bookstore entrance and hailed a passing taxi. As she gave the driver the address Kenneth had sent, she cast one last glance down the street, searching for any sign of Grayson's car. But there was none. She still had time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, turning off her phone as the taxi pulled away from the curb. The ride to the old barn took less than 20 minutes, but to Raina, it felt like hours. With each passing mile, her resolve strengthened. She wasn't the same frightened bride who had fled her wedding in panic. She had found her strength at Wild Mansion, in Grayson's belief in her, in her own rediscovered sense of self-worth. Whatever Kenneth had planned, she would face it with courage. The taxi dropped her at the entrance to a long, winding driveway that led to the barn. As she paid the driver, Raina glanced around, taking in her surroundings. The property was isolated, surrounded by fields that offered no cover, no place to hide. If Kenneth had chosen this location to ensure privacy, he had chosen well. "You want me to wait, miss?" the driver asked, looking doubtful. "There's nothing out here but that old barn." "No, thank you," Raina replied. "Someone's meeting me." The driver shrugged and pulled away, leaving Raina alone at the entrance to the property. Taking a deep breath, she began walking up the driveway toward the barn, her steps purposeful despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. The barn loomed ahead, its weathered wood and sagging roof a stark contrast to the lush green fields surrounding it.